We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com.
Welcome to another edition of AVRant. My name is Rob H., and I am here with...
Lee Overstreet, pinch hitting for AVRant once again. This is pretty exciting. We get a bonus episode with Lee, huh?
That is what is going on. Yeah, we missed 1 week, and so to make up for it and not have a ridiculous backlog and force people to wait ages and ages to hear their question answered, we are doing 2 recordings in 1 week. Now, I'm not exactly sure when we're going to actually release these. I think it might end up being like Friday and Monday, just to kind of spread it out a wee little bit and not mess up our schedules too much. But who knows? You might be listening to this on the weekend or something. I don't know what it's all going to end up being, but there are 2 recordings. That is what
There's
counts.
one thing we do know, and that's Rob is an answering machine. He is Google.
To me, it's much more stress to not answer people's questions of like, I can't leave it alone.
Listen to that dedication, though. I mean, for real, folks, if you write in a question, it gets answered, no matter what it takes.
Well, I don't want to make promises because, I mean, we just do this as a labor of love. We just do this for fun. So, right. But yeah, that's what we'll try to do. We're a couple of checkered shirt guys here to answer some home theater questions. That's what's going on. So, yeah, to get your question answered, all you have to do is ask. Please email us at question@avrant.com. That is the place to send your questions, question@avrant.com. That is our email address. By far the best way to reach us and have your question answered. You can, of course, come to the website. That is avrant.com. Surprise, surprise, by the email address. And yeah, we are on social media. You can find us, unfortunately, still on Facebook. Facebook.com/AVRant podcast. I don't want to be on Facebook.
Unfortunately,
Facebook is what you make of it.
Yeah, we're really not doing very much over there anymore. So, but it does exist. And then, yeah, let's see what else. YouTube. YouTube is important because you can see the videos, and particularly you can like go in the chapters and hop around directly to the question if you want to. So you can save a bunch of time, and the links are all there. The links are on avrant.com as well. But
are we still allowing crazy comments on YouTube?
Yeah, comments are open now. Yeah, I'm not doing a whole lot with the comments. I'm not really collecting questions from the comments. If someone has a good question and they put it in the comments, I request that they email it to us, because otherwise,
comments are just for rude stuff.
I will lose all organization unless it is emailed and I can stick it in my folders and keep track of it that way. So youtube.com/AVRant. That's our channel. You can find us there. You can see our lovely smiling faces. And yeah, not much of a video because we're just recording our Skype feeds, but you know, you get that. You get the photos. That's the main thing. If people send in photos, you can see those.
But, you know, you get to see when you see our facial expressions, you see how earnest we are.
There you go.
About these things. You see how important it is to us, I think.
And most of the time, you can watch Tom frowning as he reads things while I'm talking, or his camera freeze and switch and mess up Skype. That's what's going on. He's looking for a new webcam, you know, one with a non-broken USB cord. So hopefully that'll get fixed in the not too crazy distant future.
I'm about to order a new computer, so I will be upgrading a whole new desktop media machine.
Wow.
So I'll be upgrading to a much better camera than I've been using over the past few years. It's pretty exciting because a friend of mine won a lottery and got a RTX 3070 card.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
and he's selling me his old card.
Oh, okay.
So I'm finally going to have a video card. That's what's been holding me back is I'm not paying $800
Yeah, not from a scalper. Yeah, exactly.
No, I'm not paying that much money because I don't game.
No
I'm just
kidding.
I'm exporting video. But anyway, so I understand about needing new stuff.
For sure. There's a shortage of stuff everywhere.
Crunchy. It is. Well, you know, really it's just video cards. Honestly, I had no trouble getting a motherboard and all the other parts. So I know there's a chip shortage, but it isn't the chips on the motherboard. It's not the CPU.
There's a lot of stuff shortage in general, but there are ways to reach us individually. We haven't mentioned that yet. So Tom Andre, he's the normal host of this podcast. He can be reached at directly at tom@avrant.com. I can be reached directly at rob@avrant.com. And then all of us are on Twitter. So Tom is at avrant_Tom. I am at FirstReflect, FirstReflect, if you'd like to find me there. And Lee is on Twitter as well. Where can folks find you, Lee?
I am at Lee Overtweet.
That's the place.
On Twitter, yes.
That's not the only place. What's your other one? You're more active on your other account.
I am more active because it's still new to us. I created an account so I could focus on issues of electric vehicles and our new Tesla. So Tesla Lusa, at Tesla Lusa, because I live in Tuscaloosa and have a Tesla.
That's right.
So Tesla Lusa, you can find me. If you just want to talk about EVs and any of that related technology, man, I'll go on forever. So, but at Lee Overstreet is probably more appropriate for AVRant issues.
That's
but
right.
Honestly, either one, I pop back and forth all the time.
So there you go. That's how you can find us. And yeah, we're going to thank the people who support this podcast. We call them our listeners of the week. So some people support us financially, which is super duper nice because absolutely nobody has to. And we aren't in this to make a pile of money. We are not trying to make careers out of AVRant. So,
but if you gave us a pile of money,
if somebody wants to just fall asleep on the zero button over on Patreon. Right. So patreon.com/AVRant podcast is a way that you can sign up for making automatic monthly donations. We have 131 patrons over there, which is very, very nice. And Karl M and Martin are two of our patrons who let us know that they are supporting us that way. So thank you very much, gentlemen.
All right.
Yeah, you can also support us on PayPal if you want to. For a one-time donation, just come to the website, avrant.com, and on the right-hand side, it says Support AVRant, and you click that, and it'll take you to PayPal. You don't even have to have a PayPal account. You could just enter credit card information if you want to. We never see that. Only PayPal sees that, and that's another way you could donate if you want to. Yep, some folks also support us outside of those two ways. Vincent, for example, sent me an Amazon gift card, so that was really, really nice. Thank you very much, Vincent. Very nice to receive a little present that way.
I'll also accept Dogecoin.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I don't know how to accept Dogecoin, but I will accept it. It sounds fun.
Sure, why not? I always preferred when people called it Doge. Because I'm like,
Doge.
Because I'm like, hey, put the little Japanese spin on it. Why not? Doge.
Right.
But no, it's Doge.
And it sounds like Doge.
I know it's Doge. And then some folks have been very, very kind to us. They send us notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going, which, 1 week we weren't there, but we're back with a double dose. So we're keeping it going. And we very much appreciate that. So BJ and Bertrand, they sent notes. Yuri, who gave me a chuckle over on Twitter because I was like, yeah, warning, we're going to be away for a week. He's like, that's fine. I'm about 50 episodes behind. So, plenty of time to catch up now.
Just spend 2 weeks doing nothing but listening to AVRant. Just chug coffee for 2 weeks straight.
Even then, at 2 times speed, I don't think you're going to get through 50 episodes. Bob said, hey, maybe a week away will just make listener appreciation grow stronger. You never know. Absence makes the heart grow fonder.
Never take us for granted, people.
That's right. It could all disappear at a moment's
Poof,
notice.
It's a house of cards. It's going in a second.
Ariel suggested, hey, just do a 4-hour episode to make up for it. Well, pretty close. Two 2-hour episodes. It adds up.
Yeah. Well, if you go for 4 hours straight, you're supposed to call your doctor. So I don't know about that.
That's absolutely right. There is no way Tom was going to be wrangled into doing a 4-hour straight episode. No. Carl says that he looks forward to hanging out with us for 2 hours each week and asked, is there a way to watch us live while we're recording? Not at the moment, Carl. We're not doing that right now. It's just, it's ever so slightly more effort, and I'm looking to put less effort in, not more. So
I did ask about that, Carl.
Even that tiny bit of extra effort is just like my brain's in a million other places right now.
I mean, who among us hasn't laid on the couch and watched whatever was on the TV because the remote was too far away? It's kind of like that.
That's exactly it. And it's like the tiny extra threat of a technical glitch that could cause us to have to redo something. It's like, nope, just gonna keep it simple. We're a podcast. The video is like a byproduct of us just wanting to see each other's faces while we talk. Martin also sent in a note. He's been listening for 2 years now, and he loves both our humor and our knowledge. That's very nice. Thank you, Martin. And Blake says, thanks to AVRant, his family has loved their 7.2.4 SVS speaker system for the past 3 years. So that's wonderful. Wow. That's exactly what we're here for, to help anybody who has a passing interest in home theater really enjoy what they're doing in their movie and TV and game and music watching and listening. So that's fantastic. Thank you all very much for those. And let's crack right on because we got plenty of questions on the list.
Oh, yeah.
Not all the time in the world. Let's hit some news.
Sony loves to tease us. They're a naughty
I might
company.
replace the word tease with troll because it's getting a bit
Troll
crazy.
tease. Yeah, drive us insane. So a year and a half ago, the X900H TV was released. It promised to add 4K / a 120 hertz support, VRR and ALLM via future firmware updates. 4K 120 support was indeed added about a year ago, but it has a processing bug that makes it look a bit blurry, kind of not what 4K is all about.
Right.
And that seems to be unfixable. You also have to choose between either 4K 120 support or Dolby Vision. You can't have both at the same time. I'd pick Dolby Vision over 4K 120 any day. Of course, I'm not gaming, on a big TV or anything. So, but yeah, Dolby Vision should win that every time. Well, Sony's newest firmware update for the X900H, just released this week, has finally brought VRR and ALLM as promised, except not really. Sony is warning that you can manually put the TV into VRR mode after this update, but it has bugs, and there will be another firmware update, quote unquote, before the end of the year. So when you're counting down, watching the ball drop, here comes the update. That's supposed to get it working properly. They super duper pinky swear that's coming. People who have tried it out report that the 4K 120 blurriness still persists. Dolby Vision cannot be on when VRR is on, and local dimming also gets disabled. Great. Perfect.
Yep.
Then Sony also announced a new marketing campaign. Last year, certain models were marketed as ready for PlayStation 5 based on 4K 120 support. This year, get ready for perfect for PlayStation 5.
There shall be no confusion.
All the higher, kind of good, perfect, sort of maybe. All the higher-end 2021 J-series models, both OLED and LCD, get that label, the perfect label. And they'll be getting 2 new features, quote-unquote, by the end of the year via, you guessed it, a future firmware update.
Why would we have any reason to doubt?
This is the world we live in now. You don't really buy a thing that's ready. You buy a thing that's ready to be ready. Then Sony decided, oh yeah, the X900H and X80J and X85J might as well get the 2 new features too via future firmware updates. I mean, why would we doubt them?
Yeah, no promise of by the end of the year for those ones.
So, what are these 2 new features?
Yeah.
First is auto HDR tone mapping. Not surprisingly, some people have taken the description to mean it's some kind of alternative to Dolby Vision, since the PS5 doesn't support Dolby Vision whatsoever, but it's not. The PS5 already supports something called HGIG, HDR Gaming Interest Group, at a system level, although many games ignore this system setting and just handle HDR on their own anyway. Okay, but great, that's a feature. Auto HDR tone mapping just automates the HGIG setup process. Instead of manually putting your Sony perfect for PlayStation 5 TV into HGIG mode and then manually adjusting the PS5's HGIG calibration settings, that all happens automatically. In a way, that does have similarities to source-led Dolby Vision, which is what the Xbox Series X uses, and it can also use HDIG with a similar system-level manual HDR calibration that gets ignored by a lot of games. So, in both cases, the TV basically reports to the game console what its native peak and average brightness capabilities are. Then the game console tone maps games that support it to fit within those capabilities. That makes sense.
That's the idea.
Yeah. The second feature is auto genre picture mode. It's weird because all Sony TVs can already do this, although you have to turn on the auto picture mode setting. So this just automates that by using ALLM. Your perfect for PlayStation 5 will automatically go into game mode. That's the bottom line. So
those are the amazing features that make it perfect for PlayStation 5. It's, if you really break it down, it's kind of a whole lot of nothing because these features already exist. This just automates it a little bit more.
Right.
That's really all that's going on.
But
here.
you know what? Don't undersell the convenience of things being more automated.
Yes. Yeah.
And Sony's pretty good at that. If you have an all Sony system, you can just kind of kick back and say, go, Sony.
Yeah, that's the idea. So the idea is the tone mapping is happening on the PlayStation 5, and you don't have to manually calibrate the PlayStation 5 to the capability of your TV. that should just happen automatically with Bravia XR televisions and eventually the X80J and X85J, as well as going all the way back to the X900H. The PlayStation 5 still doesn't have VRR, variable refresh rate is what that stands for. Still doesn't have it. They said since before the launch, that eventually the PlayStation 5 would have that, but it doesn't. So I guess that's why they're not super worried about their televisions having it either. So yeah, I mean, a whole bunch of waiting. That's why I say this is verging on trolling at this point, because they keep announcing this stuff, but they're not like, we're announcing it and it's out today. They're like, we're announcing it and future firmware update before the end of the year. We promise this time. So yeah, we'll see how it actually all goes. By the way,
we're having a little bit of a glitch right now.
In the meantime. Oh, okay, that's okay. That's just
the glitch is over.
Slowing us down.
Are we back? Are we good? Right. Just a little bit of slowdown. Don't know what happened there. But I was just going to say, never buy anything based on future updates. I
mean, that we have absolutely had to learn that lesson over and over at this point. I mean, the go with the AV receivers, the Yamaha AV receivers, where, you know, the promises of supporting all the HDMI 2.1 features there. I mean, similar thing, right? Promised it when it was coming out, said future firmware update is going to add all this stuff. And then, the actual solutions ended up being quite a bit more complicated and much more hassle. So, if it works, if a feature works out of the box, then you can count on it. Anything else, I wouldn't count on it these days.
Exactly. That's true for my car, too.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, in other news, LG's 2021 OLEDs already got an update back in June to add support for Dolby Vision at 120 hertz with VRR all at the same time.
Yeah.
And now LG has updated the 2020 OLED models so that they, too, can check all the boxes when you look at the detail screen on an Xbox Series X. So they got it, man.
Yep.
Somehow.
So LG is kind of the polar opposite. Instead of just, I mean, they do things like, you know, we are attempting to make this happen. They do announce that, yes, a future firmware update is coming. But so far, they have had a much more solid track record of actually delivering when they say they're going to do something in a relatively timely fashion. You know, we're talking weeks or months instead of literal years. And so, yeah, at the moment, I think there might be maybe one of the high senses or TCLs or something. It has all the same capabilities, but the LG OLEDs, they are definitely sort of the rock solid choice. If you want all the HDMI 2.1 possible gaming features, they've got it. All the boxes are checked with a green check mark if you check it in your Xbox Series X, including Dolby Vision at 120 hertz in 4K with variable refresh rate. That's like all the things that the Sonys make you choose. Pick one of these, says Sony. We can do one of these, but not all of them at the same time. Why would you
just
want
side
that?
thought, I wonder if a whole generation coming up where gaming is their main entertainment and high refresh rate is everything, for how long over the next couple of decades will 24 frames per second in movies last? Like,
that's been a question.
Because 24 FPS in movies is going to be like, that's how old people watch movies. I'm telling you, that's what's coming.
And plus, if you're used to stuff that was shot on people's phones, that's all at a higher frame rate than 24.
60?
For the most part, you have the option of putting your phone into 24 frames per second, I suppose. But
only on the high-end models, honestly.
That's right.
I have one of the best phones Samsung makes.
For the cinematic look.
Right. Well, if I want to do 24, and I have wanted to, I have to go into Pro mode to do 24 on this phone. You can't do it on the regular mode. It only goes down to 30, and 30 is the dumbest frame rate, but that's a whole different topic. I'd love to talk about how dumb 30 is. Anyway, Zappiti, which is not a pasta, Zappiti announced the 3 new media player models and has them available for pre-order. The headline features are the additions of Dolby Vision and HDR10 Plus support, which won't be coming to their older players.
They will not.
They've also got upgraded processors and new OLED front panel displays. Zappiti. The $900 Zappiti, I hope I'm saying it right. That's what it looks like. I'm unfamiliar with Zappiti.
That's what it is, yep.
The $900 Zappiti Neo has a single hard drive bay. The $1,600 Zappiti Reference gets dual hard drive bays and upgrade audio processing and DACs. The $3,000 Zappiti Signature goes nuts on the audio DACs and adds dedicated headphone amplifier and headphone jack. If you have some of those like $5,000 headphones that float outside your ears, and what,
right.
the flat yeah. They're expected to ship in November. So that's update on Zappiti media players.
We know our friend DJ over at Brightside Home Theater Podcast is a big Zappiti fan. I've got a Zappiti Mini and have barely used it, but I do actually like the system because if you are backing up your own discs, Zappiti makes it very easy because most of us, if we're backing up our own discs, we're using MakeMKV. That is certainly the free and easy software. You can donate to support them, but they don't actually charge you because they are perpetually in beta. They have never, ever come out of beta. And so, yeah, when you do that, instead of actually doing the entire MakeMKV process, opening the disk, converting it to an MKV file, as the name implies, they have an option in there where you can just back up the entire disk to a folder structure, just a BDMV folder structure. And so that's just one for one. It's just taking the bits off the disk and putting it into BDMV folders, and that's what the backup is. And it's like a one-click process, and there's no processing going on, and as fast as your drive can read it, you can have a backup of your disk. But playing back a BDMV folder, not everything does that, and Plex, for example, doesn't do it. In Plex, you need the entire process of converting it to an MKV file. So Zappiti makes it very easy. Zappiti can just play back the BDMV folder, or if you backed up things using Slysoft's software, that just creates an ISO file, an image of the disk, nothing changed whatsoever, which is a true backup. Then Zappiti can play an ISO file as well. And what's nice there is if you actually want the entire disk experience, the exact same experience of the FBI warnings still show up and, the disk menu comes. The main thing is the disk menu still comes up because when you do the conversion to an MKV file, it's just the movie. There's no disk menu. There's no special features. You could individually turn each special feature file into its own MKV, but that's a little bit of a manual process. So what's nice with the BDMV folder structure or just an ISO image file is it is the disk. It plays exactly like the disc would play, and the menus can show up and everything. That's optional. The Zappiti lets you skip the menus if you want to and just go straight to the main movie.
I haven't ripped a disc in ages.
Yeah.
It just hasn't been a thing I needed to do. Is it still the case that for MakeMKV, do you need a separate little ripping piece of software that no one can talk about how to get it, and you just tell people
not software-wise. MakeMKV, that is the software. That can handle all of that, but you do need an optical disk drive with the correct firmware on it because a retail optical disk drive, the firmware is not going to support using MakeMKV on it. You have to flash the firmware on your optical drive to use a compatible firmware that allows the software to work.
So that's the new equivalent to finding the little ripping utility, because that was always the case back in the day, is people would go, well, to use this, you'll need this other piece of software that you should go Google, hint, hint.
Yeah, I know.
So now it's hint, hint, you need a firmware update.
Yeah,
hint,
you
hint.
need to turn your optical drive into I'm pretty sure it's Libre drive. That's I'm pretty sure that's what it is. I mean, if you go to the MakeMKV forums, there are people there who are just like, yeah, I've got drives that are ready to go. Just pay me a nominal upcharge over the retail price, and I'll ship you a drive that's ready to go. And that's what DJ did. That is the easiest way to do it.
So there's a wink and a nudge to this.
Sure.
Still to this day to get MakeMKV. Well,
because of course, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act says, hey, don't back up your discs, just full stop. But in countries outside of the United States, it is legal to have a backup. It's not necessarily legal to crack the copy protection to make the backup, but having the backup is not illegal. So there's a wonderful gray zone to all of that. In in Canada.
Yeah, there are some pot laws that are a little absurd like that too. You can have a little bit, but you just can't buy it.
Not in Canada. Pretty easy here.
Oh, well, welcome to where I live.
That's right.
Anyway, so I suppose we should move on to some comments.
We should.
Yes, James shared the instructions for accessing the various hidden settings and info menus for LG's OLED TVs, and there will be links to that.
There will, yeah. I actually scrounged up 3 separate YouTube videos that describe how to do all of these things. This information is out there, but this is really nice to just kind of collect it and say, hey, all of these, quote unquote hidden menus that you might have heard about in LG OLEDs. Here are the quick and easy instructions to how to get them. So I'll run through some images here that just to collect it. One of these I blanked it out just so we don't get hit with copyright because they were actually showing some material that might have been copywritten. So I've just blanked that out, but you can see one of the first ones on the LG OLEDs. They call it the FreeSync information menu. If you want to have a visual indication that you are truly in 120 hertz mode, that variable refresh rate is truly active, if you want to look up whether you're getting RGB or YCC signals and whether you're getting 10-bit or 8-bit or 12-bit and all of that stuff. It's a small little menu. It just pops up, but it lets you visually see all of that in real time. So you can even see the variable refresh rate ticking around. So to access that, you just pick up the LG remote and spam the green button. You know how there's the 4 colored buttons?
Right.
Technically, you have to hit it 7 times, but if you just spam the green button, this will show up.
Just punch it.
And the next one is hitting the mute button very quickly 3 times in a row. Brings up a little hidden menu. This lets you turn off the automatic images that show up and the LG logo that shows up. If you just want the screen to go black when nothing is playing, this is the place where you can set that. Hit the mute button 3 times. There is one. This is only on the newer ones. This would be on the C10 and the C1 or the X and the 1 models from last year and this year. If you highlight, so you open up the settings, you go to the picture part of the settings, and you just highlight the first option, which is just to select which picture mode you're going to do. Don't actually click into it, but just have the cursor there highlighting it. If you then punch 111311 on the remote, it'll bring up this whole HDMI signaling override menu, which honestly, you shouldn't really touch anything in there.
That sounds, dangerous.
But if you want to force your television into Rec 2020, even when the signal coming in is Rec 709 or something like that, or force it into DCI-P3, or force it into Rec 709, or if you want to, there's that you change the electro-optical transfer function. This is a manual override system for people who are authoring content. That's what it's for. But it's there. It exists. If you want to play around with it, you can't actually hurt anything. This isn't a service menu. This is still a user accessible menu with the standard remote that comes with the TV. So you can't really hurt anything. Everything by default is set to auto, and you can always put it back to auto. So you can't really do, permanent damage to your TV, but that's how you get in there. The one I like is the diagnostics page. The diagnostics page shows you all kinds of information and all of your
you like that.
HDMI signaling. And to get to that one, in the UK, it'll say program tuning. In the US, it'll say channel tuning, but you just highlight that and then spam the 1 button on the remote. Just hit the 1 button.
Bang on the 1.
6 or 7 times. Your diagnostics will come up, and you can look at a whole bunch of diagnostics information. Then there is an Internet Protocol configuration menu.
That could be useful.
Yeah, for that one, you, again, highlight the network part, the connection part of the settings menu. Again, I think in the UK it says connection, and in the US it says network, but you just have the cursor highlighting that, and then you enter the code 82888. 82888. What's important there is if you have a Control 4 system, this is the only place to activate that. So, and your Wake on LAN setting is in there too, as well as network IP controls. So that can be a really handy one. If you were like, why doesn't my Control 4, if you're managing to set that up yourself manually, why doesn't my TV show up there automatically? This is how you get in there. Highlight the network part, 82888. And lastly, a lot of people get annoyed because by default, if you stop playing something, then some lovely artwork will come up automatically and start showing on your LG OLED, but it's overlaid with this thing that says no signal.
That is terribly annoying.
Okay, so all you have to do is click the red button, and that disappears now.
That's all it is.
Click the red button once. That's all you got to do.
Okay.
That goes away. Although,
will that work on mine too?
I don't think so. As far as I'm aware, that only works on the C1 model or the 1 models, C1, G1.
Darn. Okay.
Yeah, but who knows? Maybe that's coming in the future. So yeah, that's all the LG OLED hidden menus. We've collected them all in one place for you. You don't have to go looking anymore.
Some of that's useful. Some of it just sounds dangerous. I know you said you can't hurt it, but I get nervous when I get into some of that.
All of these ones are fine. You can always put them back, and these are user accessible. This isn't service menu stuff.
Gotcha. All right. Gurinder suggests the Andover Mills Marsley Jet Black Rug, available at Wayfair if you're looking for a very black area rug instead of full carpet.
Yeah.
Like if you want it to look like you're approaching the monolith from 2001 and you're going to fall into it, that's the rug you want. You turn the lights off in your room and it looks like a black hole on the floor. Yep. That would be very cool.
Because we were talking to, I'm pretty sure it was Karl, and we were talking about the blackest paint, the blackest velvet fabric, the blackest wall-to-wall carpet you could have installed, and Gurinder's like, hey, you guys forgot about rugs. Sometimes you just want a rug. So that's a suggestion. I like it. Andover Mills Marsley Jet Black Rug, available at Wayfair.
I gotta admit, there's something fun about the idea of an overly non-reflective room that also doesn't reflect light or sound. Like how much could I pad the walls with these carpets so that it is ultimately dark and ultimately silent in this room? And how weird would that be? It's just you and your heartbeat and thoughts. I don't know. Just sounds kind of fun.
Not?
Like who can last the longest without losing their mind,
That's
right? All right, we got some questions from last week because that's really what's going on. All the questions are almost from last week, right? That's why we're doing this episode today. Questions from last week. Here we go from Billy. A little while back, we told Billy to hold off on replacing his already very good Sony 675 ES projector since we expected to hear something from JVC before the end of the year. That was good advice. He's ready to pull the trigger on one of the new NZ laser models, but he's torn between the $10,000 NZ7 and the $15,000 NZ8. Dude, if you can do it, I mean, YOLO. Go. On paper, the NZ8 has more impressive specs, and his room is totally dedicated and completely light controlled. It's almost like what I just mentioned. You can go in there and just lose your mind. It isn't literally all black, but it's close. He should go for it. So in his case, maybe that 80,000 to 1 contrast versus the 40,000 to 1 contrast would actually be visible. What do we say? Which one should he get? I don't know, man. I'm already, I'm telling you to spend 50% more and go for the gusto, but you do have sort of the ultimate situation to maybe be able to see it.
He does have the type of setup and the type of room where, the very best black level and the very best contrast might actually be visible. For the majority of people, if you've got light colored walls or a non-matte finish on your walls, I would probably be saying I'm not worried about the slightly better and the improvement in contrast is all in the black level. That's where the doubling comes from. You go from a 0.05 black to a 0.025 black. That's it. But if your room is completely blacked out and matte, that might actually be perceptible to you. Outside of that, what are the advantages of the NZ8 over the NZ7? Now, the spec says that the NZ8 can get ever so slightly brighter, but if we're talking HDR mode, if you put the projector into HDR mode, the NZ8 has a physical color filter that will go into the light path to widen the color gamut all the way out to full DCI-P3.
Really?
Whereas the NZ7 does not have the physical color filter. It hits about 93, 94% of DCI-P3. It's no slouch in terms of wide color, but it's not 100%. So that's the difference there. However, as you would expect, as soon as you put a physical color filter into the light path, that reduces the amount of light output.
Yes, I'm fascinated that you could put a filter to get more color.
Yeah.
That blows my mind.
Yeah. So, it's just widening the color. It's just deepening the saturation of the color, yeah.
How?
Yeah.
Wow.
You're getting rid of, it's laser light source at this point, so there's not much to do. But yeah, so in effect, counterintuitively, when you go into HDR mode, the NZ7, very much like when we were comparing the NX5 to the NX7, the lamp-based modes, the lamp-based projectors, the one without the physical color filter actually ends up brighter, even though the spec says the maximum number of lumens is slightly lower. Once you go into HD mode, it's actually a bit brighter. But putting that physical color filter in there not only gives you the wider color, it also deepens your black levels a little bit further. So if what you care about most is the very deepest black levels and the very widest color, that is basically what the NZ8 offers over the NZ7. Now, I've been saying all along, back when it was the NX series, I said don't sleep on the NX5, and I'm still saying don't sleep on the NZ7 because, like I say, 93, 94% of DCI-P3, pretty darn good.
That is very nice.
It's actually a little bit brighter than the step-up model in HDR mode because of that lack of the physical color filter. And then, to me, for the vast majority of people, that 40,000 to 1 versus 80,000 to 1, like I say, that's all in the black level. And the vast majority of people are just really never going to see that. I would have to say, in Billy's case, you have the room where you might see that. I think he can decide for himself whether he's the type of person who's like, look, I want the very best black levels and I want 100% DCI-P3 color. If that's you, Billy, and I'm pretty sure you know yourself well enough to decide that at this point, then if the $5,000 extra doesn't hurt you too much, I think you can justify it. But I want to put your mind at ease that if you're going, look, $5,000 is a lot of money. $10,000 as the starting point is a lot of money, and then $5,000 more is making me hurt in the wallet, which I would completely understand. Don't feel as though the NZ7 is going to be some kind of massive compromise. It is still going to be blacker and higher in contrast than your already very good Sony. So all of this is an upgrade no matter what you do. It's just, but I'm sure Billy knows himself well enough.
So yeah, you would have to be in a situation where like, okay, $5,000 doesn't change anything in my life much. And I've obsessed over black levels forever.
That's right.
And it drives me nuts day after day that I don't have deep enough blacks.
And I just want to know that the colors are 100% accurate. Yeah, you put those things together.
Makes sense. Since Billy uses a CinemaScope screen, he's had a Panamorph Phoenix Pro anamorphic lens in front of his Sony the whole time. It was marketed as being ready for 4K, but he's read other people's takes that it actually degrades 4K images a little bit. Opinions online vary, though, and he knows we typically don't recommend anamorphic lenses, but with the JVC projector upgrade, what do we think there? Keep using the lens or sell it and just zoom the projector to fill the width of the screen? And, I'm with you guys, by the way, Rob. I'm not into putting another lens in front of something. So that's what I would do is not use.
It's twofold in how it objectively slightly degrades the image. On the one side, it is just an additional piece of glass. It is not completely perfect. You're going to have a little bit of distortion geometrically. You're going to have, intentionally it's distorting it geometrically,
right,
but
that's the whole point.
There's going to be a slight bit of unintentional distortion geometrically to the image. There's going to be a tiny bit of chromatic aberration. This is a good lens. Don't take any, but objectively, it's not making the image better. It can only make it slightly worse. And then on the processing side, you are no longer using one-to-one pixel mapping. That's actually kind of the bigger deal to me, because in order to make this work, what you're doing is compressing all of the, you're actually, if it's a 2.35 to 1, you're stretching it vertically so that it fills the entire height while still being the same width. So natively, everyone would look tall and skinny, and then it goes through the lens and everybody gets stretched back out horizontally. Or if it's a 16 by 9 native image, then it compresses it horizontally, again, to make everyone look tall and skinny as it's coming out of the projector natively, and then the lens stretches it back out. So you're getting away from one-to-one pixel mapping. Isn't it lovely to have 4K resolution and then show a 4K image on that where every single pixel in the signal gets a pixel in the actual imaging device? That's one of the ideas. Again, when you do that processing, you can only make it slightly worse. You can't make it better by processing it. So my inclination is you can definitely sell and recoup a good amount of money on that Panamorph lens. There are definitely people who will buy that from you.
To help make up for the more expensive projector he's thinking about.
You know what I'm thinking.
If it has better black levels, there's no light spill.
You're not worried about the black bars that are physically being projected above and below the screen. There's no question about that. But if we look at his front his front wall, I'm not worried about black bars from a JVC projector being projected above and below Billy's screen. His entire
onto his black walls.
His entire front wall is matte black. This is not going to be an issue. So
that'd be great. Yeah.
My vote, 100% in your case, Billy, is sell the Panamorph lens, put those funds towards the new JVC projector, and run your JVC projector without an anamorphic lens. I really don't think you're going to miss it.
That sounds like a great idea. Let us move on now to Karl M. Karl M. Karl likes to purchase new gear fairly often, and his brother benefits by getting his hand-me-downs.
Nice.
I'd like to join his family.
That's right.
His brother uses a 5.1 setup in a 12 by 16 foot room sitting 9 feet away. Sometimes the volume gets up there for movies, but he's never cranking it at full reference volume. From Karl, he inherited an Integra Pre-Pro, Sunfire Theater Grand Amp, Magnepan MG2B front speakers, a Martin Logan Cinema Center, and a Martin Logan subwoofer. Wow, again, I'd like to join the family.
And incredibly physically oversized equipment for a 12-foot by 16-foot room. But hey, you know what? When you're getting it as a hand-me-down from a sibling, I wouldn't say no either.
I'll just put a cushion on top of a subwoofer and sit on it if I had to for free, man. Come on. Hand-me-downs are awesome. In order to have the newest HDMI features, he got a Denon X3700H to replace the Integra Pre-Pro. But the Magnepan speakers are quite difficult to drive. They are low in both sensitivity and impedance. The Martin Logan Cinema Center is a bit of an odd design. It actually uses a dome tweeter, but then it has an electrostatic mid-range and then dual 5 1/4 inch woofers.
Yeah.
The specs indicate that it isn't especially hard to drive, but it does have unusually low impedance in the treble, and it has very high power handling. So I assume that could make for a very bright speaker.
Possibly, yeah.
So Karl thinks it would probably be best to still have external amplification for the Magnepans, but the center and surrounds should be okay with the Denon powering them. Now, Karl's brother could just keep the Sunfire amplifier, but he could also potentially downsize a bit, which we're thinking maybe he should, by getting just a 2-channel amp or a pair of mono blocks. Karl was thinking outlaw audio in either case. What's our take? What do we suggest? One question that comes to my mind right away is I'm just curious what the room correction does with those speakers in the first place on something like a Denon amplifier. I'd love to just see it, whether it works right or you like it or not. I would like to just see, does it kill the treble a lot in room correction because it's a really bright speaker? What happens there?
Yeah, like starting with the Magnepans, they are a true dipole because the back and the front are both open. It is just a piece of mylar and a couple of strips of aluminum acting as the drivers there, and it's just it looks like a screen that you would change behind or something like that. That's what the speakers look like, the Magnepans, and there is every bit as much sound coming straight out the back as there is out the front, and those are just moving back and forth. So it is a true dipole directly to the sides of the Magnepan speaker, is a complete null at all frequencies because you've got exactly 180 degrees out of phase coming out of these. With the Martin Logan Center, unusual design, but they're all about electrostatic over at Martin Logan, so they did that for the mid-range driver, which, putting the pieces together, when the impedance is so low in the treble, that must be playing all the way up into the treble as well. But because electrostatic speakers are so highly directional, they also threw a dome tweeter in there to try and get you some high frequency dispersion so that you don't have to sit with your head in a vise to make your center speaker work. So it's a bit of a strange design going on there. I tend to agree that I would still want, even in this very small room sitting close, I kind of would still want an external amplifier. In fact, I'd want it for all 3 front channels, if I'm being completely honest with you. I don't entirely trust that Martin Logan electrostatic center to be a benign load on an AV receiver. It would probably be okay, but I'm with you. I think an amplifier makes sense. So my genuine answer to you is I would just keep the Sunfire because there's absolutely no reason why you need to replace the Sunfire amplifier in any way whatsoever. However, it is a physically large amplifier that puts out a lot of heat, and you're in, his brother's in a small room. So I get that maybe he wants to downsize. My number one choice in this, because I just mentioned that I would probably want to still power all three, is I would go over to Emotiva and I would get their Base X A3, the 3-channel Base X amplifier. That is rated at 140 watts, all channels driven simultaneously.
Yeah.
From 9 feet away, even with Magnepans, that is going to be plenty of power. Those are 4 ohm rated, and the A3 can actually deliver 250 watts into 4 ohms. From 9 feet away, you're never going to need more than that. $500, I think it checks all the boxes. It's physically smaller. It doesn't put out as much heat. It's only $500, and it's got plenty of power for the room size and the seating distance that you've got, but it'll take that load off of the Denon and happily drive 4 ohm or 3.2 ohm speakers all day long.
I'm still dying to see the room correction graph, though. I just want to know. I just want to know. Maybe Carl's brother can do that just for me and give me a picture. I just want to see what it looks like.
I don't have that information, but I mean, connecting the Base X A3 to an AV receiver, that's exactly what it's designed to do. It only has RCA inputs, but the Denon receiver only has RCA pre-outs, so they will work completely happily together. Over on the Outlaw side, I mean, if you went with their monoblock, the model 2220, 2220, that is rated to deliver 200 watts into 8 ohms and 300 watts into 4 ohms. It is a monoblock, so you're only got one channel that's being driven. $700 because they knock $100 off if you buy 2 of them. So getting 2 of them would be $700. If you're getting 3 of them, let's see, that's $1,200 minus $200, so it's $1,000 to get 3 of them. So to me, that's complete overkill, and you're going to end up with a stack of them. And
now you have a stack.
You need 3 additional power cords and power plugs. So to me, that's overkill and unnecessary. There is the Model 5000X from Outlaw as well. That's a 5-channel amplifier. You really don't need that. So I end up just coming back to that Emotiva as being your best option here. There you go.
I don't know, or just stay with what he has.
Or just stick with the Sunfire. There's no reason you need to replace it other than just physical size and heat.
Right. So I'm still laughing at the idea of Carl's brother like stepping behind the Magnepan speaker and throwing a shirt and a pair of pants over like a changing screen and coming out in like a silk robe. Y'all ready to watch movies?
You definitely could. It would work functionally.
All right. On that note, we're moving on to Matt S. Matt's room is 15.5 feet wide by 22 feet long by 10 feet high. His primary seat is 15 feet from his display and centered in the room width-wise. He wants to expand to a 7.2.4 speaker configuration, and he understands that these days, regular monopole speakers are usually recommended for their surround positions, particularly for object-based audio formats like Atmos. But there are still a lot of bipole and dipole options out there. So which setup do we prefer? What do we think is best? And what would we recommend for his setup? Boy, that's a wide open set of options to go with. But
yep.
I personally lean toward the accuracy of the direction of the sound. For me, aim it right at my head. But again, yeah, there's a lot out there. But I do think, isn't bipole and dipole sort of a leftover from the olden times when surround was much more diffuse and less channels?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a bygone era with those. The dipole design in particular, and I'm going to get to this because I actually think there is a specific scenario where dipoles still make a lot of sense, and I really still like to use them. Spoiler alert, it's not going to be for your room, Matt, but there I am going to describe a scenario where I think they still make sense. But dipoles in particular, we're trying to mimic the entire row of speakers that you have in a full-size cinema. Back when it was just Dolby Digital 5.1. It wasn't Atmos where every single speaker is individually addressable, because that's the case now. You go into a full-size cinema, they got a whole row of maybe 10 speakers along the sidewall. Every single one of those speakers can be individually addressed in an Atmos system. But back when it was just Dolby Digital 5.1, they were all playing the exact same thing. So you got this very diffuse, lots of wave interference sound coming off the sidewalls. And the dipole speaker, which is, it's 2 sets of drivers facing in different directions, 180 degrees out of phase with each other. So it mimicked that more diffuse, lots of wave interference type of sound to give you the fuzzy, it's generally coming from over there, but I can't quite tell exactly where from over there.
That's the room sounds bigger now.
Yeah, that's what the dipole was for. The bipole speaker, honestly, they aren't really much of a problem when used as a surround or even as a surround back speaker, because they are, I mean, it's basically just two speakers aiming in slightly different directions, firing in phase together. In essence, you just have a very wide dispersion speaker. So I don't think bipoles are really a problem. And in Matt's case, a bipole speaker might make sense just because of his room size. He's got a fairly large room. It's not massive, but when he's 15 feet away from his speakers and the room is 22 feet long, the idea that the speakers on the side of your room just have extra wide dispersion and, sort of cover that side area rather than being a pinpoint location, that's not out of the question. But that said, when you have an Atmos signal or a DTS:X signal, if it basically comes down to a little bit of personal preference, in my opinion. If what you prefer is the most pinpoint precise, that is exactly where the sound is coming from experience, you want to stick with monopoles. And in Matt's room, you've got, 15 and a half feet wide. It's not massive, but it's not narrow. It's not like he's squished in there and his seat isn't right up against a wall. So you've got plenty of space. So if the experience you want is the most pinpoint precise, I can tell exactly where the sound is coming from, you want to stick with monopoles, Matt. But there's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, I kind of prefer it when it's not quite so pinpoint, when it sounds a bit just wider, and like I can definitely tell it's coming from my right or left, but it's not pinpoint precise anymore, because maybe you find that distracting. Some people do. There's two ways I would attack that. Either I would still use a monopole speaker, but I would just elevate it a little bit and make sure it's a little bit behind my seats, right? I wouldn't have it 90 degrees to my side at ear level, because that is going to be pinpoint precise. If you elevate it a bit and move it back a little bit, then, it's a little bit fuzzier. But the bipole speaker, like I just mentioned,
about what we have in our living room, we have a 5.1, and our speakers are about 1.5 feet above my head.
Yeah.
And just maybe about 8 inches behind my ears.
Yeah. And that's what I prefer too. That's the setup that I personally prefer. But I think a bipole speaker could totally make sense, particularly when you have enough room size. In a smaller room, I'm probably going to go monopoles all day long. But when you have enough room size and maybe you want the experience that it's a little bit more diffuse, I think a bipole makes sense. So I promised that I have a scenario where I think dipoles still make sense. To me, dipoles still make sense when you do have seats that are very close to the side wall. Because that's when I would say a dipole that is actually counterintuitively directly 90 degrees to your side. So you're like, okay, I'm already sitting close to the side wall, and then I'm going to have a speaker that's physically right there, right beside my ear. But remember, the dipole is 180 degrees out of phase, and just like I described with the Magnepans in the last question, right in that spot, directly 90 degrees to your side, is a null at all frequencies. There's all the sound gets canceled right there. So if you're physically very close to the side wall, but you put a dipole speaker right there beside you, you don't have the sound blasting straight into your ear. You're actually sitting in a null, and all the sound you're hearing is reflected from the front and the back of the room by the drivers that are facing that way. I still think that makes sense. And some people, maybe their primary seat is in the middle of the couch, but they still care about the seat of the couch that is, to the left or the right, and that seat is right next to the wall. And that's where I think a dipole still makes sense.
Yes, I've been to a friend's home theater where a large surround speaker was like right in my ear.
Yeah.
And that's not the right kind of experience.
No, it's distracting. It's not enjoyable.
Right.
It dominates whenever it plays and pulls your attention away from the screen. Your surround speakers aren't supposed to do that. So, Matt, I don't think you need a dipole speaker, but it's a great question, and that scenario might apply to other people.
I'll tell you what, if you like pinpoint directionality in surround sound, anybody watching Squid Game, I noticed that show has a lot of really precise surround sounds coming from all around, very precise, all to the left and right and behind me. It's a crazy show. It's really good. Okay. Moving on to David from the Movie Chatter podcast. David wants to help his brother, here we got another brother, upgrade his home theater setup. It is a bright living room with lots of windows and a large opening to other parts of the house. So gorgeous to the eye, difficult for home theater. There are no plans at all to change the look or feel of the room. I understand that. It's hardwood floors, but there's a rug and furniture, so it isn't totally bare and reflective. It's Not ideal, but you can do stuff with it.
So yeah, we would not call this a dedicated theater room. By no means. This is a multi-purpose room. It's a living room first, but we have a nice display and a surround sound setup in here. Completely makes sense. And got to live in the real world. We're on board.
So many of us have to live in the rooms we have.
That's right.
We can't alter the house, can't buy a different house just yet. The living room is 21 feet wide and 14 feet long, so plenty of space, with the main seats 11.5 feet from the TV. The current TV is an old 50-inch Samsung, and that's the main thing in need of an upgrade, along with the old Denon 2112 CI receiver so that he'll have the latest HDMI features. The current speakers are a DefTech 600 5.1 package. David ran a bass sweep, and the little DefTech subwoofer wasn't producing much of anything below 60 hertz. So that got upgraded to an SVS PB1000 Pro. That's a good upgrade, which was as large and expensive as David's brother was willing to go. And again, that's fine because we all have our limitations.
Yup.
I don't want to see that giant box over there.
I'd say that's more than reasonable, to be honest.
But what a huge upgrade that is.
Yeah.
So, upgrading to an 85-inch TV would get him to a 30-degree field of view. They've had a look in store at the Samsung QN85A, and both really liked it. But there's also the Vizio P Quantum X, which they haven't seen in person. OLED has been considered, but due to price, a 77 inches is as large as he'd be able to go. The majority of the time, he's watching in full daylight, so which TV option do we think is best in this case? And I'm going to guess that we are not going to recommend the OLED in this particular case. We're talking wide open and a lot of bright light watching in the daytime. You wouldn't get the most of those gorgeous black levels necessarily.
Right, yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, I completely disagree with all of the common recommendation that somehow OLEDs aren't bright enough to watch in
they're
daylight.
Bright.
They're plenty bright.
Yeah.
And the contrast and the perfect, like you never have blooming around anything, and the colors appear more saturated to your eye because when they're next to black, it's truly black. Like, I still think OLEDs look fantastic in the daylight, but it is more expensive, and the biggest he could go is 77 inches, and I completely agree that if you can get to a 30-degree field of view, that's a really nice. That's what SMPTE wants you to have. That's sort of on the low end of what THX or the movie theater crowd would have you have. So, and the scenario described, I'm like, yeah, there are some really nice 85-inch LCD TVs out there that will look spectacular, and I have zero problem recommending that. I actually think in the scenario described, you hit on the right one. The QN85A, so that's one of the Neo QLEDs that now uses the mini LED backlights. The QN85A in all of its sizes other than the 85-inch actually uses, they're calling it an ADS LCD panel now, which I don't actually really know what that stands for or is, but it's always described as being very similar to an IPS, an in-plane switching, which is the type of LCD that has not as good contrast, but wider viewing angles. And apparently ADS LCD panels are very similar. Same thing. Lower contrast, but very wide viewing angles. However, the 85-inch size in particular is a VA LCD panel, a vertically aligned LCD panel. So it does have the good contrast, and it does have the deeper black levels, and Samsung puts on their wide viewing filter on that because their goal with the 85A series was to have wider viewing angles than LCDs typically have. Where Samsung really pulls ahead of the competition is their anti-reflective screen coating. They have the best one, hands down, and if you're in a room that's full daylight all the time, you want it.
Yes. Okay. Right.
So the 85-inch QN85A is $3,500. It's not cheap. There are some 85-inch models that are a little bit less expensive. There are, of course, ones that are more expensive, such as Samsung's own QN90A or LG's, QNED 99 or Sony's X95J. Those are all more expensive than this one. But I think you've actually hit on the right one. The closest competitor would be LG's QNED 90. QNED is what LG has done for their mini LED offerings. They're calling them QNED. The 90 is the 4K model. And the things you would be quote unquote giving up with the Samsung is Dolby Vision, because Samsung doesn't do Dolby Vision and LG does. And LG has more than one HDMI 2.1 input. The QN85A somehow, at a $3,500 television in 2021, still has a single HDMI 2.1 input. But at least it does have one. And when we talk about AV receivers coming up, that isn't really a big problem. So, other alternatives. TCL has some 85 inches, but they don't have any HDMI 2.1 features built in. And he talked about wanting the latest HDMI 2.1 features. Sony has their X91J. That one is $2,800. So that's one of the options where if you want to bring the price down, Sony's X91J is there, but doesn't have as many local dimming zones, doesn't get as bright. So that's the trade-off. And the anti-glare coating isn't as good as Samsung's. Right. The Vizio P Quantum X, I mean, a really good value, but actually right now it's less of a good value because you can't really find them anywhere. So the best price I could find was...
It's never a good value if you can't actually buy it.
The best price I could find was $3,300, so really not any less expensive. And it's always had some issues with its 4K 120 and VRR support and stuff like that the newer QN85A doesn't have. So at the end of the day, I think you nailed it. I think the QN85A is the right choice in this particular case. And you both already like it, so I don't think it'll be a problem.
Right. If you've already seen it, yeah, that's probably going to be great for you. I would just make double sure that at the angle you're sitting in that one armchair, that you still like the color and brightness.
It does have the wide viewing filter on there though. Right, so that's about as it checks all the boxes for the particular scenario. You nailed the scenario that Samsung designed the QN85 for.
There you go. Sometimes the answer is just exactly what you think it is. Okay, which receiver should he get? He doesn't want more than 5.1, maybe 5.2. 2 is cool there. Although, if it's a 7-channel receiver, he might be willing to try a pair of front height speakers for Atmos. David suggested a Denon X3700H for its HDMI features and Odyssey Multi-EQ XT32, but is that overkill? Maybe. So we know we're only going to 5.2 and we're just slightly curious about Atmos,
right?
Which I've been to, but I'm not that curious.
Yeah, I mean, objectively speaking, the X3700H having 9 amplifiers built in and being capable of processing 11 speakers, it's overkill in that sense. That's overkill. Yeah. But I mean, you're right. I would probably want the better room correction. And I mean, it does have a single HDMI 2.1 input. So when I was saying, the Samsung only has a single HDMI 2.1 input, my thought is it would be really nice to have more than one HDMI 2.1 input if at all possible. So that's why I think if we go over to Onkyo, and I'm not going to point you to their flagship RZ50 because you don't need that. You don't need 9 amps built in and 11 speakers. Nope. But I mean, again, technically a bit of overkill because I'm going to suggest their TXNR 7100.
Okay.
All right. That one goes for $1,100, which at present is less than the X3700H, so it's saving a little bit of money. It does have 9 amplifiers built in, so, but the step down, the huge difference here is the step down to the TXNR 6100, the next model down, the 6100 sticks with Onkyo's AccuEQ room correction that I think is nigh unusable and best left turned off. Whereas when you step up to the NR 7100, you get Dirac. All right, so huge feature difference there in terms of the sophistication of the room correction, and that's why I think that one is worth it.
Room correction might be pretty important in this room.
It might be. Plus, the Onkyos give you 3 HDMI 2.1 inputs and 1 output. They can do the proper switching. They've already been confirmed to work with all the 4K 120 and VRR stuff. So I really like that. I think that's the right solution. The one thing to be aware of, because we know David's big into home theater, and that I suspect more than his brother actually is. But the NR 7100 does not have pre-outs. All right, so it has 9 amplifiers built in. It can run a 9-speaker system, but it cannot send out the signal to external amplification. You are using what's built into the NR 7100. So just a thing to be aware of, but I don't foresee that as a problem in this setup.
All right. Let's spend some more of his money. Should the DefTech 600 speakers be upgraded? The subwoofer upgrade made a very noticeable improvement, as I imagine it would. And it sounds pretty nice at present, but David is keen to do more upgrades, and thinks some Martin Logan motion speakers Martin Logan Motion Series speakers. The more compact on-wall 4i model might be nice. They heard them in a Magnolia store at Best Buy. David felt they'd be an upgrade, but his brother wasn't convinced. What do we say? Part of why David wants his brother to go for it is because the DefTechs could then be repurposed as front heights. Is that worth it? So who's spending whose money here? I'm just a little confused, right?
That's why I suspect David is more into this than his brother actually is. And this is his brother's house.
Let me tell you something, David. What's tough is when you just can't understand why other people aren't as excited about something you're excited about, right? And it's just the case. I mean, it's like I have a friend of mine who's a cyclist, and we went to him for advice on what bikes to buy, and I don't like the bikes. I don't like them. They're too. It's like, man, I just wanted something to cruise around on. I'm not like putting on a helmet and hoofing it in a bicycle outfit. You know, I just my butt's too high and my head's too low, and it's too big of a bike. Anyway, so it may not make enough of a difference to him to change, and if it sounds nice now, maybe that's all he needs for now. This is a lot of change. This is a lot of change at once, right?
Yes.
And if you change too much at once, it's hard to like appreciate the things you've just changed.
Right. The bass was the biggest difference for sure. And no surprise that going to a PB1000 Pro versus the 5.1 speaker package DefTech was a big improvement. My honest take on this is I wouldn't push your brother to upgrade the speakers at this point, David. Now, we're all going to agree here on this podcast. It's not as though it's impossible to find a genuine upgrade to the DefTech 600 speakers. Absolutely, of course, that's possible. But like, I'm just looking at the whole scenario, and if you, David, already think it sounds pretty darn good after the subwoofer upgrade, and then your brother is already happy with it, and then you heard the Martin Logan Motion speakers, the 4Is, which are not gigantic, they're on wall. We can see in his room, everything is mounted on wall. And your brother was like, take it or leave it. Like, I don't think he needs this. No. I would say my inclination, because I think on-wall speakers make sense in here, I probably would have pointed towards Klipsch's on-walls, Klipsch's Reference Premier on-wall speakers. I think those could have some benefits in this room, just given its size and, the efficiency that they offer and, nice, sleek design that would look good on the wall. But I wouldn't push for those to be the upgrade either. So, that's my honest take on it. I think your brother's doing enough.
The next thing you might want to push him on is some sort of sound absorption that looks like art.
Yeah.
It's such a reflective room. See if you can talk him into something, because those bricks for the fireplace and those flat walls and the hardwood floors, see if you can talk him into some more padding on something. That would be more of an improvement. It wouldn't cost as much. Moving on to Alex Y. Alex is using a single rhythmic FVX15 subwoofer at the moment, but he plans to get a second one in the future. He's heard us mention miniDSP fairly often, but he isn't familiar with them, and he isn't actually sure what a miniDSP is and what it allows you to do. So could we explain a bit? Who needs a miniDSP? Does anyone need? Is it mainly for multiple subwoofers, or would it be beneficial with just one sub? So a refresher on miniDSP.
So miniDSP is a whole company with multiple products. For example, anytime we mention the UMic 1 measurement microphone, miniDSP is the company that makes that. So that is the miniDSP, UMic 1. They now have a UMic 2 as well that costs even more. And I really don't think is necessary for hobbyist purposes. The UMic 1 is fantastic, but they also make separate outboard boxes that have Dirac processing built in. So if you have a preprocessor, or you're using the pre-outs of your AV receiver, you could plug it into one of the miniDSP Dirac external boxes and then use external amplification. But you could add Dirac to any system that way, as long as you have pre-outs and external amplifiers. So they've got a multitude of products. But I'm pretty darn sure what Alex is talking about is when we just say plug it into a miniDSP or use a miniDSP, we're referring to the miniDSP 2x4 HD. That's the particular product of theirs that we just use the name miniDSP as shorthand for. And what it is, but the 2x4 HD, as the name implies, it's 2 inputs, RCA inputs, and 4 outputs. And what it is a set of filters. That's the easiest way I can explain it. Very programmable. very manageable filters. That's what you've got. You can apply IIR, infinite impulse response filters. You can apply FIR, finite impulse response filters. You can create your own crossover slopes. You can apply delays. You can apply equalization. Parametric equalization, fur filter based equalization. It is very, very versatile and capable. And that's why at the price that they charge for it, $225, it can be a fantastic, affordable solution to particular problems. Would you need it for one subwoofer? Possibly, if you have no other way of applying equalization to your subwoofer and your desire is to apply equalization manually, then a miniDSP could be a wonderful solution. I mean, it is tremendously versatile and capable when it comes to applying any type of filter you can want. And that's entirely what it's about. So maybe you're using an older AV receiver that doesn't have room correction, or you're using an Onkyo that only has AccuEQ, and we would rather not use its built-in equalization. Plenty of subwoofers don't have equalization of their own built into them. They just have a volume and a phase knob, or maybe they don't even have a phase knob, just a polarity switch, right? So that's the scenario where it could benefit you for just one subwoofer. But by and large, where we like to recommend them is when you have more than one subwoofer. Because what we want to be able to do is we don't really feel that most of the AV receivers, the vast majority of AV receivers out there, really handle multiple subwoofers in the very best way possible. We talk about telling your AV receiver that you only have one sub, sending a single subwoofer output into a miniDSP 2x4 HD. And then you can use the miniDSP 2x4 HD to give you individual delays for each of your multiple subwoofers. Individual trim levels can be done in there. Individual equalization applied to each subwoofer. So if you're using something like the multi-sub optimizer software, which, you know, miniDSPs, they can work brilliantly with Room EQ Wizard and the multi-sub optimizer software. So that's where it's a match made in heaven. You know, this software is free, and this is the device. Like when we talk about you take a bunch of measurements of your bass, and then, you know, in the software, you could create the correction files, or you could create the slopes or the equalization curves. But then how do you actually apply it to the subwoofer? What's the physical hardware device that takes what you did in the software and actually changes the signal? It's the miniDSP. It's the 2x4 HD. That's the piece of hardware that you plug all of the filters that you calculated in Room EQ Wizard or in the multi-sub optimizer software. You plug all of those into the miniDSP, and it sits in the signal chain and applies those filters to your multiple subs. So that's where it's most beneficial. We think it's really the most cost-effective and simplest way to do that. You can do some of that now if you have a Dirac system that uses their Dirac Live bass management. That's their multiple subwoofer system that can do essentially the same things that a mini DSP 2x4 HD could do. But not everybody has a Dirac system, and not all Dirac systems can use Dirac Live bass management. That's a newer feature that only the newer processors can use. So this is a way you can add it quite affordably to, or you can add capabilities similar to it affordably to virtually any system.
So if you have two subwoofers in a rather complex situation and no way to do it on the equipment you currently have, it meaning EQ the subs especially, that is who needs a miniDSP.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good way to understand it. Alex has also been reading up on bass EQ, BEQ, and we talked a bit about the BEQ archives last episode. What's our experience with BEQ? Do we think it's worth getting into BEQ?
So, I mean, here is another great example of what a miniDSP 2x4 HD is. A fantastic device to use. I really love that you know, the people are putting the time in and analyzing all of these discs and streaming versions of a whole bunch of different movies, because for whatever reason, I don't know why various studios are deciding to mess with their audio signals. You know, they're messing with what the reference volume, you know, they're not actually doing it at regular THX reference volume. A lot of them are putting out signals that are quieter, and then particularly on the deep bass, they're deciding to filter that stuff off because, I mean, the common feeling on it, the guess on it, is that they know a lot of people are just watching on built-in TV speakers or particularly on sound bars these days.
Yeah.
And particularly on sound bars with dinky little wireless subwoofers that come with them. If those things try to play 25 hertz at full reference volume, they just fart out a bunch of noise and they sound awful. So this practice of filtering off all the bass below 35 hertz basically is sadly quite common. And unfortunately, it's on like the Ultra HD Blu-rays. Like regular Blu-ray still seems to be the safest bet when it comes to audio. The Ultra HD Blu-rays are often getting these filtered off low bass things. So I love the bass EQ catalog. I love that people are keeping track of that. If you want to manually correct for it, I would never go as far as literally creating a new curve for every single movie.
For a movie? No.
I would never
I do not have the patience for that whatsoever. Absolutely not.
But if you look through the BEQ catalog, what you'll notice is most of the movies fall within like 3 types of bass roll-off. It's going to be 12 decibels per octave or something pretty close to it, 24 decibels per octave or something pretty close to it, or 48 decibels per octave, which happened to War of the Worlds, right?
Really?
And so what's amazing with the miniDSP 2x4 HD is that it can work with a little infrared remote. It's $5 to add it on when you order it. It's got a little infrared receiver that's built into the thing, and it has 4 memory presets. So with infrared control, either from the little remote that you order with it or with a universal remote control, you could have preset number 1 is you don't have any of this bass EQ filter applied to it. For content that's mastered properly, that's your default. But then you could have a 12 decibel per octave, a 24, and a 48 built in.
How about that? Okay.
Those are your other presets, and you look it up. You'd still want to look it up in the catalog because you don't want to, mess it. You don't want to boost things by 48 dB when you only needed to boost it by 12.
No, 48
that could lead to
dB,
trouble.
no. Yeah.
But, I'm willing to look it up in the catalog. I'm not going to literally tailor it because, I mean, like I say, it's close to it, right? It's like 12 dB per octave or close, maybe it's 14, but I'm like, you know what? Good enough for me, for my purposes, good enough. Yeah. So that's another great application of the miniDSP 2x4 HD.
But yeah, what a terrible practice making discs.
Why have standards? Why have standards if you're going to deviate from them all the damn time?
Right. I mean, and so what if someone has a cheap sound bar and it distorts? That's not my problem. Mm-hmm. They bought the cheap sound bar.
It lets them know they should have got something better.
Right, and I'm way too lazy to go looking up individual movie bass roll-off amounts. I'm not, but it's fascinating.
Yeah,
and it's interesting to know who's doing it wrong. And one would assume you could find out which studios and audio engineers are doing this.
Yeah,
you might be able to notice a pattern and who's doing it, but that's really frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that, but that has always happened to some degree, especially in audio releases, music in general.
Mm-hmm.
Pop music today is mixed for the idea that most people listening to pop music are listening on crappy, muddy headphones.
Yeah, I mean, music doesn't have the standards. That's what's even more frustrating. Movies, we got the THX reference volume standard. Just stick to it.
Just use it and let people figure out how to buy better speakers and headphones. Right. All right, we are finally reaching new questions.
We're finally to this week, Lee. We've got
we
45 minutes left.
Welcome to now, everyone. Right. New for this week. All right. David has a new question. The Odyssey Editor app got an update a little while ago, and it mentioned in the release notes that it was to add support for new 2021 AV receiver models. Is that a sign of new models on the horizon? Well, there's always new models on the horizon.
Yes, we're all hoping that they're, the X3700H, X4700H have replacements on the horizon in the near future. And of course, eventually they will. But no, this isn't an indication of that. This was actually because when the X8500H got its update to add one HDMI 2.1 input, then it became the X8500HA. And over on Marantz, there was the AV8805 Pre-Pro that got the upgrade to give it one HDMI 2.1 input, and it turned into the AV8805A. Those are actually the 2021 models they were talking about in this update. Right. So it's old models that just got a hardware upgrade and got a new model number, and they put that in there so that, because there's a firmware update that goes along with the HDMI board replacement. So in order for the app to recognize the firmware model number, there was an update to the app. So that's actually what it's for. It does apply to the stealth-launched S760 down at the bottom of the range, because that got stealth launched, and I still don't think it's even on Denon's website, but you can go to a local Costco and quite possibly buy one. So it applies to that too, but we can't take it as an indication that the X series is getting a whole bunch of upgrades before the end of the year. Just don't know if that's going to happen or not.
It's not the tea leaves you think it is.
Nope.
All right. Hey, Infinite Gary. I knew there'd be an Infinite Gary.
Of course.
Question.
I had to put one in there for Lee.
Infinite Gary came across a fun description of the Col-R-Tel black and white to color TV converter. How adorable. There are electronics that would have to be wired into a black and white picture tube, and then a set of red, green, and blue color filters that would go in front of the black and white TV screen on a spinning disc. The electronics would make an incoming NTSC color TV signal would take an incoming NTSC color TV signal and extract the red, green, and blue color information. Then they would illuminate just the correct parts of the black and white image for whatever color filter was in place as the color wheel spun in front of the TV.
Yeah.
Wow. It cost $150 in 1955. That's about $1,450 in today's money. That was much less expensive than a whole new color TV, but the filters were physically small, so you only got about a 10-inch image. So you'd have a small black and white TV, which I guess most of them were, but that's pretty small. What interested Gary the most are the claims that it actually delivered quite accurate color. More accurate than most color TVs at the time. Is there any truth to that? Gary is skeptical. Man, now that is getting on back there.
It is.
I swear I remember an episode of Happy Days where they bought just like nothing like this. It was just a thing you put in front of the TV to try to make it into a color TV. So it was like green on the bottom and blue on the top, and it was hilarious. I swear, maybe my brain's making that up. Anyone remember an episode of Happy Days where they were trying to make their TV color?
It would make sense.
Am I crazy?
I don't think so. I don't know for sure.
in your infinite knowledge, Rob, do you know how well a 1955 color filter spinny thing? Because that's a lot of to make it actually show the right color. You've got to do a lot of electrical changes to what that black and white beam of electrons is doing.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, because it's interesting because we come up to DLP. Single chip DLP lamp-based projectors today, and it's not a completely dissimilar idea. The idea that you are sequentially flashing red, green, and blue. So, of course, in this case, you only want the black and white TV illuminating the red parts that should be lit at the time that the red color filter is in front of there, and the blue and the green and so on. It's sequentially flat. I'm sure you got a rainbow effect because it wasn't spinning that fast.
Right. But also, how in the world you can't change the speed at which that beam can hit all parts of the screen.
With the cathode ray tube, though, it's scanning, right? The cathode ray tube is it's a scanning.
But it can only scan
beam
across the screen so fast.
Oh, but they were fast. Cathode ray tubes, that wasn't a problem. You
could change the rate. It would almost be like changing the frame rate. Like, wouldn't you have to triple it to go red, green, blue, red, green, blue?
No. It's still happening. The scan rate is. Yeah. No, the scan rate is still at the same, so that's why I say I would suspect you got a rainbow effect from using this spinning disc in front of it.
It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, but in terms of just the accuracy of the color, the old joke was NTSC was, what was it? What does that actually stand for? A National Television Communication System?
Something like that. Everybody said it was never twice the same color.
Exactly.
NTSC.
That was the joke, right? And the reason that came about is because when they developed it, they set the color points for NTSC television broadcasts to the most capable cathode ray tubes they could develop in the lab. They're like, this is what it will be, so this is where they set the color points.
Right.
Unfortunately, that was much wider than any commercially available television that a consumer might buy was ever able to reach at the time.
At the time, right.
Various brands they did different. They're like, well, we have the best green out of anybody. Like that was like Hitachi. Hitachi always went after trying to have the best green.
Sure.
That was their thing. And others were like, we got the best red or we've got the best blue. But basically nobody was actually hitting the colors that were in the NTSC signal, which led to this whole never twice the same color. What was that called? Backronym.
The backronym.
Where you make it up from the letters that actually exist, right? That's where that came from, because from brand to brand, from house to house, everybody's television colors look different. So the idea that physical color filters could actually potentially deliver more accurate color than a TV you would go into a store and buy, there's some truth to that, because the color filters could actually be the intended colors, or at least equally away from the intended colors, instead of we've got accurate green but entirely inaccurate red and blue. Maybe all three colors were a little bit inaccurate but by a similar amount, so that at least white ended up being correct.
Yeah, it was basically the phosphors, the quality of the phosphors, and how expensive that was to make.
Exactly.
So shadow mask and all that.
In a lab, they had color televisions that hit the full NTSC color spectrum, but nobody was buying those for their actual house. So there's some truth to the idea that the color filters might actually be more accurate. Now, the black and white television would have to have at least the correct illumination levels. The Luma signal would have to be correct, and not all black and white TVs were equal. So in the end, in practice, this might not have been true. But the whole idea that physical color filters potentially could have delivered more accurate color than a color TV you would have bought, there's truth to that, Gary.
I'm still coming back to how confusing it is that would possibly work, because there's the scan rate problem.
Yeah.
If you've got to do red, green, and blue in the same amount of time that TV was supposed to be doing,
it's on
black
screen
and white
for
screen,
1/3 of the amount of time that it should be. That's
which means it's hitting less detail. It just doesn't seem possible. Anyway,
well, you're getting each of the colors like 1/20th, or let's see. So I mean, it was still ultimately scanning at 60 hertz in North America.
Right.
It was interlaced, but it was scanning at 60 hertz. So now each color up there is up there for 20 hertz.
Okay. I want to read more about this.
It's out of there for 1/3 of the time. You're getting each color.
So 180th of a second?
How does that work? It says, let's see.
You got to fit 3 in there.
It's every 60th of a second.
You got to fit red, then green, then blue. Red, then green, then blue. Red, then green, then blue. And you got to hit all the lines on each one to get full resolution.
I'm pretty sure, because it was a pretty big wheel. I'm pretty sure it was it was red for 20 out of the 60 hertz, and then green for 20 out of the 60 hertz, and then blue for 20 out of the 60 hertz. It wasn't spinning that fast.
Right. So it would make it shmooey blurry. You'd lose some temporal resolution.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay.
I'm sure you got a rainbow effect. I'm certain.
Sorry, I'm fascinated by that. But and if anybody remembers, am I right about a Happy Days episode? Yeah. I swear to God. I swear. How weird is my brain? I don't know. I could be making it up. I watched a lot as a kid. Anyway, moving on to Mike M. Mike just moved into a new house, and he wants to be able to have outdoor movie nights. He'll use a pair of JBL self-powered speakers for the sound, so he's just looking for projector and screen suggestions. He wants to keep it all under $2,000. What do we suggest for the screen material? He intends to make a DIY frame out of PVC. Is this something he's expecting to leave set up, or he just wants to take it out, set it up, and then bring it back in?
Didn't say in the email, so I'm not completely sure, but there's a pretty easy place to point you for any outdoor screen needs, and that is Karl's Place. Karl's Place screens, this is what they specialize in. You just want to get the basic white material. It basically comes out to $1 per diagonal inch. That's essentially what the price ends up being. So really not too bad. You can, the standard way they sell it is that it comes with a black border around. It's just a vinyl screen, so it's weather resistant. And it just comes with a black border that has grommets built into it. So if you can construct any type of frame, you could hang this off of the balcony railing. If you have a screen, you could stretch it a little bit with some bungee cord. It's just got grommets built into the black frame. And fantastic, not crazy expensive at all, and performs really darn nicely. So Karl's Place screens, we'll have the link in the show notes.
Sounds perfect. So which projector? Should he consider a refurb Epson maybe?
I am going to say a hard no, because Epson sells LCD-based projectors. And in LCD-based projectors, you have an air filter, and it is possible for dust to get into the light path of the projector, and it is a pain to ever try and clean that out. It's not something you can use or clean out. So I am going to insist upon getting a DLP projector. For outdoor use, DLP projectors have a sealed light path. So you are not going to have dust getting into any part of the light path, and I think that is essential in an outdoor application. Now, he said he doesn't want to spend more than $2,000. Even if he's getting a 200-inch screen, he's spending about $200 on the screen material. So you've got
then there's his other materials to build his frame and whatnot.
But he hasn't spent a crazy amount of money just on the screen out of that. So I think you could go above entry level. If you want to spend as little on this as you possibly can, then I'm going to suggest to you Optima's HD 146X. All right. That's a 1080p projector. It's about $600 or $650. Okay. But it's nice and bright. It's relatively accurate, and the price, it's cheap, but that's your 1080p projector. That's one I like as a complete entry level. But I think you can do better than that because you've got the budget to do so. Yeah. And I would point you, I'm sticking with Optima here. They make projectors that work nicely for an outdoor application like this. I would point you at their UHD 35. That goes for $1,300. So it's like double the price of the HD 146X.
But we're still in budget?
We're still within budget. 3,700 lumens, something like that. It is nice and bright. Actually has pretty darn accurate color for Rec 709. It's not getting you DCI-P3, but let's not go insane here. It's an outdoor theater. We're not going to care that much about it.
Right.
And yeah, so I mean, nice and bright, affordable, and this gets you 4K resolution and HDR compatibility. And it actually has good tone mapping so that the HDR looks decent, even in a compromised situation. There is a UHD 38 that only goes for $1,400, only $100 more, and is spec'd at 4,000 lumens. But strangely, I'm not super gung-ho about that. If you want to get it, it's not going to be a bad choice at all. But honestly, the end result between the 35 and the 38, I'm not even really sure why it exists. What actually comes out of the projector is looks no different. So why even spend $100 more? To me, the UHD 35 is where you go on this. So
they wanted to have that number of 4,000.
I think so.
That's what they wanted.
Yeah, I don't really know what was up there. So Optima all the way, DLP all the way, and if you want to spend as little as possible, stick to HD resolution. If you want to do 4K and HDR, you can within budget with the UHD 35.
And then definitely you got to play one of those drive-in movie theater jingles for the concession stands.
Absolutely.
Let's all go to the movies, little dancing hot dogs. Make sure you do that and send us a picture of this
Mike, if you've never done this before, I think you're going to be stunned by how good these not crazy expensive products actually end up being. I think you'll be really pleased with those.
I think so, especially if people haven't seen a high-def projector lately. I think they do get surprised at the effect.
It's kind of ridiculous.
I talked to a friend of mine.
It's exactly why people go, how can you justify $10,000 plus on a projector when you can get this for, $1,300? I can see where people are coming from.
I mean, I talked a friend of mine into just upping his budget a little bit, and he still talks about how amazing it looks to watch movies in his living room now. He came from a low definition little duty projector he had before, and it just blew his mind what you can get now. All right, here we go with JR. JR was finally able to score a PS5. He'll be using it with a Denon X3700H receiver. That's the third time we've mentioned that receiver on this episode. And an LG C9 OLED. He watched Rob's PS5 Settings video, and he wanted a couple of points of clarification. He already has his X3700H connected to his OLED using a monoprice ultra-high-speed certified HDMI cable. So if he plugs the PS5 into the Denon's lone HDMI 2.1 input, that should be okay, right?
Let me see here. Sorry, I was a little bit distracted while that was going on.
That's okay.
But yes, the answer is yes. Even if you have a slightly older X3700H and you haven't received your SPK618 adapter box yet, the PS5 always worked with the Denon receivers. It never had it because it doesn't do variable refresh rate, and it actually uses 32 gigabits per second, not even 40. So the PS5 has always been fine with the Denon and Marantz HDMI 2.1 receivers.
So the answer is yes, he's good to go. Hook it up and enjoy. All right. Well, he also asks, why should the LG C9 be put into PC mode?
Yeah, that is part of the things I recommended, and the reasoning for it is when you put the LG OLEDs, and this applies to a lot of televisions, this is the case. When you put them into PC mode, that is when they're able to accept a full 444 chroma signal. No chroma subsampling down to 422 or 420. The full 444 chroma signal is compatible with most of the 4K televisions out there these days, but in order for them to accept that signal, they typically have to be put into PC mode. So why not get the least amount of data compression, if you're going to end up with colored text on a colored background, which might happen in a game, that's where you really want 444. You really don't want any chroma subsampling going on, and PC mode is how you make that happen.
There you go. His Apple TV 4K is also plugged into his Denon, so his source devices would both end up going into the same HDMI input on the OLED. If he uses the game picture mode for the best performance with the PS5, will that mess anything up when he's using his Apple TV 4K? Will it be okay to just leave the TV in game picture mode at all times and save the hassle of switching picture modes?
So happily, thank goodness, because this isn't the case for every single TV. Color-wise, contrast-wise, all those things, LG's OLEDs in their game picture mode can still be accurate.
Right.
Thank goodness, because some TVs that really isn't the case. The only thing you can't do on an LG OLED, if you're in the game picture mode, is apply frame interpolation, soap opera effect. You have to be
good.
Yeah, I mean, to me, good. I don't want it.
Yeah, no, I want to see as it's supposed to be seen. Don't create image for me that's not there.
But some people, they love the soap opera effect. So, I mean, that's the answer. All right. As long as you're okay with no soap opera effect, happily, the game picture mode can still have accurate color and contrast and all those important settings. And it will actually kind of like force you to not have soap opera effect, which I'm in favor of. So you can leave it.
How many people, I just wonder how many people who know what soap opera effect is and what causes it. In other words, you're creating 60 images per second from less than that, and you're inventing images per second. You're literally with AI creating images that didn't exist. How many people who know what that is like it? Like, I know a lot of people who just say they like their TV and they didn't know what the heck they were looking at, and then I turned it off and they went, oh, wow, that looks better. Does anybody really like it? Like, nah, man, I know exactly what that is. Please turn it on and invent frames for me.
Right.
I want to meet that person.
I don't know. I don't know what it is. We wouldn't recommend it on this podcast. So as long as you're okay with no soap opera effect, then you can leave it in game picture mode happily.
Right. It's just such a weird thing. I've always been a fan ever since way back in the day when I wanted to see a letterboxed Laserdisc.
Right.
I've always been a fan of show me what you meant for me to see. Right? So whatever frame rate you picked, whatever aspect ratio you picked, whatever you did with it, I want to see it like you meant me to see it. All right. Going further, is there any reason he should plug the PS5 directly into the TV instead and then rely on EARC for the audio? Doesn't sound like it.
In this scenario, nope. Everything you've got will work nicely. And so let's see. He said he had a C9, correct?
That's what he said.
So in that instance, like, it really shouldn't matter because the C9 was the last model year where LG's OLED still supported DTS signals from the eARC port. The CX and the C1, they don't do DTS anymore. So that was a good reason to not plug something directly into the TV and then rely on eARC, particularly if you're using your PS5 as a movie disc playback system. Then anything that was DTS, you'd have to use the Dolby backup track instead.
So is that a sign that DTS finally lost?
Oh, man. Most of the TVs that have come out in 2021, most of them don't support DTS via the eARC port anymore. So, it's not looking fantastic for DTS these days. But yeah, the C9 could have done it. So, in your case, the main reason I would still not use eARC is just because sometimes you want to bring up the info screen of your AV receiver to see what signals are going in and out. And you can't do that if you're using ARC or eARC because the video is coming straight from the source device and you can't switch over to the HDMI input that your AV receiver is plugged in to check the info because then you've switched sources. You've switched HDMI inputs on the television. So I say, as long as you can, plug your sources into the AV receiver and then feed one HDMI cable from the AV receiver to the television, and you can do that. So that's the way to do it.
There we go. Chris H. is up next with a question. Chris H. First up, the last time Chris wrote to us, he was trying to convince a friend of his to not hang AVRant Varus Grand bookshelf speakers from his ceiling just for Atmos.
Yeah.
Okay.
We tried to. Tom and I tried to convince this friend of Chris's.
Yeah, there is no need. But despite all our best efforts, this friend is pushing forward. Gonna do it. Everyone be damned. With a whole plan in mind involving lag bolts and canvas straps, Chris just hopes he isn't there when they come crashing down. I'm picturing the way like clubs used to look like in the 90s and then hanging big PA speakers. Anyways, on to Chris's own question. Is the Panasonic UB150 a good choice for an Ultra HD Blu-ray player if you don't need Dolby Vision? At $150, it's $100 cheaper than the UB420 model that we seem to recommend most often. Is it missing any critical features? Yes, Dolby Vision. He'll be using it in his bedroom setup with a small screen size right beside his bed. He doesn't actually have an HDR display in there yet, but he'll be getting one, likely a computer monitor, due to the size. So, can he save some money and get the UB150, or is there a better choice that still costs less than the UB420? Now, I'm guessing he can get away with that UB150 in that situation, because even a computer monitor that does HDR, most of those don't do very good HDR yet anyway.
Well,
and
that's kind of the whole reason you might want to consider the 420.
You think so, huh?
Well, So to be clear, the UB420 does not support Dolby Vision either. You've got to go all the way up in North America. You've got to go all the way up to the UB820. $500 machine before you get a Dolby Vision player from Panasonic. And what's crazy is there's no better option for a Dolby Vision Ultra HD Blu-ray player, because even though the Sony Ultra HD Blu-ray players technically support Dolby Vision, they do the insane implementation where you have to manually turn Dolby Vision on and off. It does not auto-detect that the disc you're playing uses Dolby Vision or doesn't. So
literally every disc you have to tell it?
Yes. Even to the point of, so you put in a disc that you know has Dolby Vision, you have to manually turn Dolby Vision on. And then let's say the next disc that you play is HDR10, not Dolby Vision. That's what's on the disc, right? And you forgot to turn Dolby Vision off. It's still going to put your television into Dolby Vision mode because it still sends the flag, but it's not going to look right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how Sony decided to do
that,
things.
Much like DTS, is Dolby Vision beginning to lose this situation?
No,
because
Ultra
people seem
HD
to care
Blu-rays,
less about it.
Ultra HD Blu-rays are beginning to lose. That's what that's an indication of. Dolby Vision's very popular. Dolby Vision is all over streaming. It's an indication that Ultra HD Blu-rays aren't, really making these companies money. So Dolby Vision on physical discs, it's crazy, but in North America, you've got to go all the way to a $500 player to actually have it work in a way that makes any sense. But he's not going to have Dolby Vision anyway. So what's the big difference between the $150 UB150 and the $250 UB420? It's the HDR optimizer. The UB420 has the HDR optimizer. The UB150 does not. So what is the HDR optimizer? The HDR optimizer does look at the HDR10 metadata. It is not a frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping. It is not the thing that the LG OLED televisions do or the JVC projectors do, where it ignores the metadata and just does it on its own, just analyzes the signal frame by frame. The UB420 does not do that. It does look at the HDR10 metadata, and then you can say, okay, my display cannot hit 1,000 nits. But, if you're talking computer monitor, 500 nits. That's probably the setting that you're going to do. And that's as low as the UB420 goes. 500 nits is the lowest setting. But you can do that. And now the UB420 will take 1000 nit metadata, 2000, 4000, 10,000 nit metadata, and it will tone map it just once. It's not doing it frame by frame, but it will tone map what's on the disk down to 500 nits for you. And now your display, see, most displays, they'll take anything up to 1000 nits and do a decent job of tone mapping that. Most displays are fine with that. But a lot of displays, if it's 1500, 2000, 4000, anything above 1000, very often it'll just clip off all that detail. All that detail above 1000 nits is gone. It's just pure white. And the UB420 is a device that can bring that back for you. It can say, okay, 1500, 2000, whatever, I can bring all of that down to 500, and your display can do that, and you'll get more detail out of it. So it's not a perfect system, but it can be beneficial. And on projectors, that's the number one place it's been used. Projectors definitely cannot show greater than 1000 nits. That's for darn sure. And most of them just clip off everything in the signal above that.
So are you manually picking a nit level from a menu, or does the screen just tell it?
You get to set your, forgetting the name in the, I think it's screen brightness in the menu. And they actually have it named like, low luminance LCD, middle luminance LCD, high luminance LCD, OLED, and then I think there's one other setting option in there. So you just go for the low, the one that says low luminance LCD in all likelihood if he's doing a computer monitor, and that equals 500 nits.
What's crazy to me is how much the computer side of things is lagging on the whole HDR
It is
front.
a bit, yeah.
Why is it so slow to adopt? I don't get it. You would think it would be easier than the televisions, than giant TVs. I can't understand. So it would almost be better. Would it be better for him to buy a small television and not a computer monitor? Would it be smarter? Would it be better at it?
I mean, he's right that under 50 inches, there just aren't really any good options. You know, like for nicely HDR capable displays under 50 inches, they just aren't there.
There's like a 48-inch OLED now, right?
Yeah, there's a 48-inch OLED, and there's plans to bring out a 42. But I'm pretty sure he was thinking like under 40 inches. He was looking more like a 36-inch size or something, or 32-inch size, that type of thing. So I think he's right. I mean, there is the VISA display HDR specification for computer monitors, and we're seeing more and more, but a lot of them are the baseline display HDR 400 rating, which honestly just means it can take an HDR signal, but it really can't show it to you.
Right.
That's really what that rating means.
I don't know that I'd worry about HDR on a screen that small, and maybe that's why
there's that too. Yeah, I mean, going all the way back, Lee's first instinct, the UB150 is a perfectly capable Ultra HD Blu-ray player. What the UB150 can do is take what's on the disc and send it out of the player. All right, that's what it can do. It can also, in the current setup that you have right now, where your current display isn't HDR, it can do basic HDR to SDR conversion. Now, that's a place where the UB420 is a little bit more capable as well, because via the HDR optimizer, you have some adjustability of HDR to SDR conversion. You can manually brighten or dim the entire image when it gets converted to SDR for the display that you have right now. So the 420 gives you some more adjustability. It lets you potentially retain more detail when you are viewing HDR on a less capable HDR display. It lets you adjust the HDR to SDR conversion on the TV that you have right now. But if you're not worried about any of that, and you'd rather save the $100 and you're like, look, what comes off the disc is what comes out of the player, the UB150 can do that. So
I think that's what I would do, because on a small screen, these computer monitors that take an HDR signal, it's not very HDR-ish.
Yeah, I agree.
So why not just have a really good, not HDR screen and enjoy your movie? I mean, it's a bedroom, and he says it's right beside his bed. So it's not even like home theater-ish where it's above his footboard. It's just off to the side. Yeah. I don't think I'd bother with HDR in that situation myself. But, if you love it, I guess you'll love it.
Yep. So hopefully that's enough to make the decision, because that's the differences between the two players, and hopefully you can decide if that's worth $100 to you or not.
There you go. Here we go with Jason S. Another new question. The last time Jason wrote to us, he asked for an in-ceiling speaker recommendation that could go with his Martin Logan Motion Series speakers in his 19 by 22 by 8 foot room. Rob said he could save him a pile of money and suggested the Monoprice Amber 8-inch in-ceiling model, along with its metal back cans, which would come to $210 a pair. Jason appreciated the recommendation, but he was talking it over with another home theater enthusiast friend of his, and he had some misgivings, all to do with their rated sensitivity and power handling compared to Jason's Martin Logan Motion speakers and THX reference volume. So, first of all, there seemed to be a small mix-up. Rob said to go with the 8-inch Amber series from Monoprice. These are rated at 89 decibels with 2.83 volts into 8 ohms nominal from 1 meter away. Their power handling is rated at 80 watts continuous, 160 watts peak, meaning 3 decibels of peak headroom. Mm-hmm. Jason's friend talked about 86 decibel sensitivity, which was probably for the 6.5-inch model, but that won't really matter once we dig into the question.
Just a point of detail so that we're all talking the same numbers. That was all.
We're on the same page. All right. Jason's friend was saying that Dolby spec calls for the ability to hit 105 dB at your seat from any speaker, including the overhead Atmos speakers. He contended that at 86 decibel sensitivity from even just 5 feet away, these Monoprice speakers wouldn't be able to do that. Furthermore, he warned that your AV receiver doesn't know how much power your speakers can handle, and with the Martin Logan Motion Series speakers having sensitivity ratings of around 92 dB, it's just going to try to play the Monoprice speaker 6 decibel louder so that they all match, and the Monoprice speakers can't take that much power, so they might pop, quote unquote. Mm-hmm. Jason trusts both of us, so he'd love for us to address all this. What do we say? Now, Jason doesn't trust me. He trusts Rob. When I say Jason trusts both of us, this is like if I was Tom talking.
His friend he was talking to outside of the podcast and the host of this podcast. These are people he trusts. He's like, but we don't agree. So what is the deal going on?
So yes, let's run through these sorts of calculations and what decibels you get out of, and is it important overall? What decibels you get from certain sensitivity ratings, etc.
Yeah, so part of this is very understandable, and I think it is worth discussing, and we've gone through some of this before, but it certainly bears repeating because it is not intuitive stuff. When you look up the sensitivity ratings on a lot of speakers, very often people just look at the first number, right? They'll look at it's 86 dB or it's 89 dB or it's 92 dB or whatever, right? They'll just look at that and they'll go, okay, that's how many decibels come out of this speaker when I put a watt into it. It's not always the case.
Oh, no.
What we used to do, and still is the case sometimes, you got to look at what the units are. When you're looking at the sensitivity or the efficiency of the speaker, what you'll often see is a decibel number and then per 1 watt at 1 meter. That's the full set of units there. But the number of watts depends on the impedance of the speaker. Mm-hmm. So when we say 1 watt and it's an 8 ohm speaker, what the industry is sort of standardized on now is instead of the 1 watt figure, they've settled on 2.83 volts, a signal that's 2.83 volts. Okay. Now, if you put a 2.83 volt signal into an 8 ohm speaker, that will be using 1 watt. Mm-hmm. So that all stayed the same. But if you put 2.83 volts into a 4 ohm speaker, that'll be 2 watts. Right? So the units matter. Right. Because in this case, they matter. Because the Monoprice Amber in-ceiling speakers are 8 ohm speakers. They're 8 ohm nominal speakers. They actually, the lowest they dip down is 7.2 ohms. So they really do stay at around 8 ohms
8 ohm speaker.
Or higher. That really is the case going on there. So 2.83 volts into that speaker, that's 1 watt going in there. So when they say, in the case of the 8-inch model, 89 decibels, 2.83 volts into an 8 ohm speaker from 1 meter away, that's 1 watt is generating 89 decibels of sound pressure level from 1 meter away.
Okay.
Now, the Motion Series speakers, they're 4 ohm rated. So when they say they're 92 decibels, 2.83 volts, which is how they rate it, but into 4 ohms from 1 meter away, that's 2 watts.
Right.
2 watts. Now, every time you double the wattage, that's 3 decibels more output. That's how it goes. So if we actually took it down to 1 watt, if we said putting 1 watt into those Motion Series speakers, you minus 3 decibels, you're at 89. You're at exactly the same sensitivity rating between the... Now, he was saying 86. He was looking at, I think, the 6.5 inch model.
Yeah.
But again, now we're at 86. If we're talking 1 watt for 1 watt in either case, that would have been 86 decibels versus 89 decibels for the Motion series. Not a 6 decibel spread, only a 3 decibel spread, because 8 ohms versus 4 ohms. And that matters when the voltage is uniform across both of them. So if we go back to looking at the 1 watt per 1 meter, what happens when you change the meters part of the units, right? Every time you double the distance, if you're in a wide open field or an anechoic chamber, every time you double the distance, you lose 6 decibels.
Right.
Because it's an inverse square law. So if 3 decibels is twice the power, then you square that. It's 4 times the power. 6 decibels is 4 times the power. So you lose 6 decibels every time you double your distance. All right. But that's in a wide open field where there's no reflections coming back at you. In a real
or my
room,
dream room, with that's all black and fully
even
absorptive.
That's not an anechoic chamber.
It's fully absorptive.
So in a real room, and we're talking speakers firing down from the ceiling here, you are definitely getting reflections off of your floor, off of your walls and all that stuff. In that scenario, you don't, in practice, lose 6 decibels with your doubling of distance. Now, he was saying, all right, where he plans to put his Atmos speakers, right, he's maybe 4 feet from the top of his head to the ceiling,
right,
and then the speaker's a little in front or a little behind. So he's like, 5-6 feet away from this speaker. Right? So let's just make the math easy. Let's say you're a little more than 6 feet away. You're 2 meters away. We doubled the distance. Anechoic chamber, you've lost 6 decibels. Let's even be generous and go with that. Let's say you lost 6 decibels. You didn't. Trust me, you didn't. You lost maybe 4 decibels.
Maybe you notice.
But let's say you lost 6 just because you doubled the distance. All right? So 89. Let's even do the lower one. 80, 86. Let's go with the one that your friend thought it was. All right? You are now, with 1 watt of power, producing 80 decibels of output, okay? So that's where we are. Now, THX reference volume says any of your speakers should be able to continuously put out 85 decibels. And they should be able to hit a peak, a momentary, transient, short little gunshot peak of 105 decibels. People hear the 105 decibel number and they're like, my speaker has to be able to play at 105 decibels all the time.
That would be murderous on your head. That would really not be comfortable.
85 is what they should be able to play.
That's probably the misunderstanding there.
Yeah. And then 105 is peak. They are supposed to be able to hit 105, but that's peak. All right?
Right.
So we can do this pretty easily, because remember, every time you double the wattage, you get 3 more decibels. And the handy back of the napkin math is every time you go up by 10 decibels, that's 10 times the power. That math works out pretty darn close, all right? So we want to hit 85 decibels. All right, so, okay, we were at 80 with the ones that he assumed, 86 decibels per 1 watt per 1 meter, and now we're at 2 meters, and we're being generous and saying you lost a whole 6 decibels, so 1 watt is 80. Okay, so 4 watts of power. Can your AV receiver supply 4 watts of power? Can these speakers absorb 4 watts of power? Yes, they can. That is 86 decibels. We've actually exceeded the continuous rating of THX reference volume. All right. But this does go up quickly, right? We're doubling the wattage every time we want 3 more watts, or multiplying by 10 every time we want 10 more watts. This does start to go up exponentially really quickly, right? So let's fudge the numbers just to make the math really easy, right? With 2 watts, we got 83 decibels. With 20 watts, we got 93 decibels.
Okay.
Right? So we multiplied by 10 on the wattage, gives us 10 more decibels, right? 200 watts in this scenario with the 86 dB efficient speakers, saying that we lost a whole 6 decibels just by being 2 meters away. 200 watts would get you 103 decibels, all right? And that's a 200 watt peak, momentary, transient peak.
Right. Not the normal rating for the amp.
That's right. And these speakers are rated to take 160 watt peaks, all right?
Right.
So if we're being strict and you thought that 86 decibels was the sensitivity rating, then okay, if we're being strict, your friend is not wrong. He's not objectively wrong, all right? At 160 watt peak, we probably hit 102. right? By the strict objective math. And you'd have to double that to get to 105, to hit that 105 peak, and the speakers aren't rated for that. Now, as soon as we go to the actual rating of 89 decibels of the speakers I recommended,
we're done. You got it.
We're done. We got there, right? If you go, we were at 89 and we subtract that down to 83. You know what? Let's make the math easier. Let's say we lost 5. We're in a real room. Let's say we lost 5 decibels. So we were at 89. We lost 5 decibels. We went down to 84, right? And does that make it easier? I don't know.
No.
That doesn't really make it easier. It makes it easier if we lost 4, then we're at 85.
Yeah, let's just say we lost 4, because that's actually quite realistic.
That's actually very reasonable. If we say we lost 4, we're at 85 with 1 watt. Well, then at 100 watts, we hit 105 decibels. All right?
There you go.
We were already there. And we go 3 decibels lower than that. So 200 watts is what's needed for that momentary peak. They can take 160, or you can do the math however you want. But the point is, we're really, really close here. We're really close here. And the sensitivity difference between the Amber series speakers and the Motion series speakers from Martin Logan, it doesn't exist. They're both actually 89 decibels with 1 watt going into them. They're both right there. So, I will say your friend is not wrong, because by the strict numbers, and he was assuming 86 decibels, yeah, he's right. The rated power, 160 watts max peak, 80 watts sustained, and it's assuming you lost 6 decibels by being 2 meters away instead of 1. The math says you're right, you're not going to hit 105 peaks, but you really shouldn't worry about it too much.
The lesson here is you're really close with any major manufacturer with normal sensitivity ratings. You're close enough, and you're never going to notice it.
And with the 89, you are there. You did it.
Literally are there.
You got there. Objectively, you got to the 105 peaks, and you can definitely play 85 decibels all day long with your 3 watts of power, if that.
Right. So you're good with those. It's
Yep.
Don't get too objective. Remember, the real world isn't just these straightforward clinical measurements.
That's right. So, I don't know, we've hit 2 hours. If you need to go, I'm okay, because we normally leave a few questions. If you want to do one more, I'm willing to do one more.
Let's do one more. Let's help someone overseas.
Yeah.
I like helping people from other countries, or from other continents, because we are from different countries as we speak.
That's true.
But let's go all the way over to Ireland with Martin J. Hello, Martin J. from Ireland. He has a 5.1.4 setup in a fully enclosed room that is only 12 by 13 feet, which, of course, we're saying like feet for someone who's probably doing meters.
Yeah, he did all the conversions in his email. He's heard us talking on this podcast, so thank you. That made things simpler.
Okay, I don't ever mind saying both. I'm one of those Americans that's trying his best to unilaterally just use metric. Mm-hmm. So I've converted myself to Celsius just kind of because it was easy. I'm trying to do like meters and distances now, trying to remember how tall I am and that sort of thing. I have a general sense for how big a meter is and a centimeter. So sometimes I'll make a reference to a centimeter. And my wife will stare at me strangely. I'm like, oh, about this big. Yeah. But anyway, I'm trying, whether the rest of my country is or not. So he has this 12 by 13 foot room and a 5.1.4 setup. Prior to ever listening to AVRant, he bought a set of Q Acoustics speakers, including the 3050 towers. Those have dual 6.5-inch woofers above and below a 1-inch tweeter and stand 40 inches tall and a little over a foot wide and deep. So they're pretty sizable. Yep. His subwoofer at the moment is a 10-inch 250-watt KEF model that he is unhappy with. He intends to get a pair of SVS SB1000 Pro subs in the not-too-distant future. That will be a good
For that room size, that is fantastic.
That'd be killer diller. But in the meantime, he's made some DIY absorption panels, nice, that he's placed at his first reflection points on the side walls. But he's just doing all the things we talk about. And he plans to make some bass traps before getting the new subs. Okay. He's finding the towers boomy, even after plugging their ports with the optional foam plugs. They're about 3 feet from the side walls and 1.5 feet from the front wall. So he'd like to know, are the 3050 towers simply too big for his room size? Will they present a problem for getting them to blend nicely with his future pair of subwoofers? Will the bass trapping help? And would he be better off downsizing to a pair of Q Acoustics bookshelf speakers, perhaps even as small as the 3020 model with its single 5-inch woofer. So, I mean, I don't think a speaker is too big for a room. It's just got boomy, inaccurate bass is my first reaction to hearing this.
I mean, he is getting the speaker boundary interference effect. That is going on. And so we actually talked about this a little bit in just the last episode that Lee hasn't heard yet because Tom and I recorded it yesterday.
It's not out yet.
Depending on when this actually comes out, it could be a greater distance. But yeah, we just recorded it yesterday. And over on AV Gadgets, Andrew is writing over there, and he wrote up a really good article that has a very handy chart in it that just equates distance from the wall to what frequency is basically the most problematic. That's math, that's quarter wavelengths, but that is the case. And so the 3 feet away from your sidewalls, in general, that means the boundary effect that's happening there is low enough that you're into the subwoofer crossover. So you can actually ameliorate a good amount of that boundary effect when you're 3 feet or more away from a wall. You can ameliorate a lot of that by having a well-implemented crossover to your subwoofer. You can fix a lot of that with your subwoofer crossover. It's trickier if you're one of these people who insists on never using a sub, but thankfully Martin is not that person, so that's not an issue. The flip side of it is, if your speaker is actually really quite close to the wall, then the frequency is high enough that you can treat it with like a 2-inch thick panel, right? You could make another DIY 2-inch thick panel, and you're going to be able to treat the 400 hertz or higher that you're getting when your speaker is like 8 or 6 inches away from the wall. But he described, his speaker's 1.5 feet from the wall, and right in that between 1 and 3 feet range, is where the boundary effect is at a low enough frequency that you need some pretty thick absorption in order to be effective at that lower frequency. But it's high enough that it's above the subwoofer crossover. So you can't really address it electronically with just
change
your
that
standard
distance
crossover.
Is what we're getting at.
So one option is change the distance, and unintuitively pushing your tower speaker closer to your front wall, which I'm thinking in a 12-foot by 13-foot room is not unattractive as a proposition.
No, that would actually be helpful, yes.
It would probably be helpful just physically for walkways and stuff. That might actually help you. Now, you would still want to put a panel back there, but now it could be a 2-inch or a 4-inch panel instead of having to be like a 6-inch or an 8-inch panel, which starts to get a little bit unwieldy. And that could take care of a large amount of the boundary reinforcement that I think is responsible for a lot of the boominess in here. Now, I would still very much want you to have the bass traps that you intend to have, because when we're talking about the 3-foot distance now, that is, like I say, it's right in the crossover region. So you can address some of that with the electronic crossover, but if you can use corner bass traps to reduce some of that issue as well, so much the better. So much the better.
This room is so close to being a square.
Yeah, exactly. So I am very in favor of you having your corner bass traps. I think that will help with this boominess that you're hearing from your towers. I do want you to put absorption on the front wall behind the tower speaker, but it doesn't have to be super thick and unwieldy if you also push the tower speaker closer physically to the front wall, which, like I say, I suspect is not going to be a problem for you in the room size that you have. So, I don't think you need to sell and repurchase speakers to do this. This is going to be a little bit of some more DIY absorption panels and your bass traps that you intended to make anyway, and repositioning your speakers a bit.
Right. Yeah. By the time you do that and you get those better subwoofers and go through the process to set those up, I think you'd be pretty happy. I wouldn't be changing those speakers until you get all the way through that process and everything Rob just described. Martin also recently bought a 77-inch LG CX OLED. Nice. Jealous. It already has all the like I'm spoiled now. I'm already so used to a 65-inch OLED. I'm like, one of these days I'll get that big.
Well, Lee'll just have to one up you and get the 83-inch. Then that's how that's gonna.
I don't know, man. I'm only about 9 feet away. My eyeballs.
You could go so much bigger than that.
I guess I could. I suppose I could.
100 inches would only be a 45-degree viewing angle.
Yeah, because I want that IMAX effect. I want to actually have to turn my head to watch,
if
like
you
the
want
football
IMAX,
game.
that's more like a 55, 60 degree. You're going to have to get like 120, 130 inch, 120, 130, yeah. They don't make OLEDs that big.
Just side note, again, I know I've been throwing tangents in here. You know what's making me mad lately is realizing I can watch so much stuff like on Netflix in beautiful 4K HDR and also on the other streaming networks as well. It looks fantastic. And then all the football games I want to watch are 720p. All of them. And not even good 720p.
You want that next-gen TV to happen. They are dragging their feet on that. That was supposed to be 2020. Now, granted, 2020 was pandemic year, so
that was a problem.
Everything got pushed back a year, but it still hasn't happened in 2021. So regardless of how you want to slice it, they're behind schedule on next-gen TV.
And that's like, 4K 60 hertz, man. What a perfect opportunity to do some beautiful 4K 60 hertz HDR, which YouTube does just fine.
Sure.
You can watch 4K 60 hertz HDR on YouTube of people just walking around, walking tours of like Tokyo or something, but I can't watch a football game like that.
That's right.
Just go borrow that guy's camera and do the football game.
Our smartphone cameras are more capable than television live production cameras.
I can do HDR on this phone. And I can't watch a major football game. Anyway, so he has this 77-inch OLED. It already has all the apps that he uses built in, but he always hears us and a lot of our listeners talking about the Apple TV 4K and even using it with their LG OLEDs. What advantage over using the built-in app is there?
The main one is frame rate switching.
Okay.
That's the only one I can point to. Is the frame rate switching.
All right.
I like the Apple TV 4K because even today, even with the other hardware streamers offering a thing that says match frame rate and that, it still ends up being app dependent. And by and large, the Apple TV 4K, like I say, I think Peacock is the only major streaming service that doesn't abide by the system level setting in the Apple TV 4K. It was either them or the did CBS All Access turn into something else? I can't even keep it straight anymore. Ugh.
Wasn't that where you had to watch one of the Star Treks?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh yeah, they're Paramount Plus now. That's who they are now.
Oh, okay.
They did change that. It was one of them. It was either NBC or CBS. One of them had the one where they refused to use the system level setting on the Apple TV 4K. Can't remember which one of those two it was. But by and large, the Apple TV 4K does a very good job of automatic frame rate switching. And yeah, that's basically the only advantage at this point. And to be perfectly honest, let's see, you got a C10.
Yeah.
I'm honestly just not completely sure whether it does any frame rate switching on its built-in apps or not. I've seen some reports that the C1s are doing that now, that they're doing some frame rate switching, but it seems to be app by app. It's not an across the board thing that you can count on that they will do it. I know on my C9 it doesn't. My C9 shows everything at 60 hertz, so there's judder. Right? When I'm watching a movie, if I use the built-in app on my C9 to watch a movie, there's judder because it's
that must be what I'm hating.
It could be.
I do hate judder must be when you do a slow pan and everything just kind of jiggles.
Yeah, everything jiggles a bit because you're showing.
I hate that.
It's 24 frames in the second, so you're showing one frame twice, and the next frame 3 times, and then the third frame twice, and then the fourth frame 3 times. So it's that 3-2-3-2 cadence. So you get a slightly jerky motion in a slow panning shot. Whereas if you do an Apple TV 4K and it's outputting 24 at 24 and the screen is refreshing at 120 hertz, so that goes 5 times for each frame. Every frame gets shown for the same amount of time.
That is a little bugaboo for me. I do not like judder.
Judder, that's the thing. So that's one of the reasons why you might choose to do that. It's a getting pretty into it thing, but if you notice and dislike judder, then I can't guarantee the Apple TV 4K is perfect across all services, but across pretty much all the major ones, except for whether it's Paramount Plus or Peacock, one of those guys messed it up. All the other ones, it does that. So
I would love to watch some things and compare between built-in on my LG OLED and an Apple TV 4K and see if it fixes the one thing I still hate about
except the Apple
video.
TV 4K is not a good source for YouTube still, and I know you like your YouTube.
Well,
so
I guess I could switch back to the TV.
There's not
YouTube.
a ton of 24 hertz content on YouTube.
There is some.
There's some.
People do it. Yeah.
But there's not a ton from what I've seen.
even I've played around with 24 frames per second on my camera and on my phone, so it's kind of fun to do. Pretend you're making a movie. All right, he has one more question, and before I go and we wrap this up, just for fun, which movie is our favorite from the last 10 years?
That's a lot of movies.
That's a lot of movies. I mean, I guess I can give it a go.
Sure, I looked this up beforehand, so I've got my answer in mind. But
for me, I'm a sci-fi nerd.
Okay.
And past 10 years, Interstellar.
All right.
I'm going to go with Interstellar. It was visually stunning. Good audio video, good plot. To me, it was kind of fun. I mean, it gets a little woo-woo.
Very sustained bass rumbling.
Oh, yeah.
If you want to
if you'll recall, do you remember? That was the movie that shut off my previous receiver.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah,
and you were like, are you sure that you didn't touch two wires in the back and so on and so forth? And I don't think I ever found anything wrong. I think it just shut the damn thing off.
Yeah,
and now this new one can handle it. I've watched that movie again in HDR. A friend came over, brought over an Apple TV
When it
device.
shut down your old AV receiver, though, wasn't that still when you had no subwoofers and you were relying on your tower speakers to play full range? Wasn't that still the case back then?
Sounds correct.
Yeah, so now you've got new AV receiver and a pair of subwoofers handling the bass.
Yeah.
So now you can play Interstellar.
Yeah, now it took, that's what it took to play it the way I wanted to experience it.
You see, this is why studios are robbing you of your deep bass. They don't want your system shutting down. They're just trying to protect you, Lee.
See, that was my problem. And if I want to enjoy it the way I want to enjoy it, I had to fix that situation. And now there's two SVS 2000 Pro subwoofers and a brand new receiver that puts out 105 watts per channel. And so now it's amazing. And in HDR, Interstellar looks fantastic.
I bet.
So,
yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
I love it. It's a little dark if you think about the beginning of Interstellar is kind of sad and a little too realistic.
Oh yeah.
And so I just like the movie. I like it. So there's mine in the past 10 years.
That's a good pick. I am going to go with Dawn of the Planet of the Apes.
Oh,
as my
really?
favorite movie from the last 10 years. Now that is, you got to keep the name straight because this is the newer trilogy. This is the Andy Serkis is the motion capture thing for Caesar.
What year was that one?
I don't remember the year, but Rise of the Planet of the Apes was the first one of that trilogy. So Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, the second one, that one's my favorite. And then there's War for the Planet of the Apes that rounded out the trilogy. So I like the second one, which is rare for me because I almost always love the first movies in trilogies. I love introductions. Introductions are my favorite part of storytelling.
Okay.
And of course, the first one is where you're typically getting all the introductions. So it's rare for me to like the second one. But Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, I love that movie. I love Koba so much.
You know what? Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, I'm pretty sure that's the one a friend of mine was in as an extra.
Oh,
and you can actually see her on screen.
That's cool.
I can send you a picture from the movie that I frame captured.
Nice.
So yeah, I need to go back and watch that. I don't think I watched it all the way through.
Oh yeah,
I just watched part of it to see her.
That is well
see,
worth
I need to do the whole thing.
Yeah.
I need to do all the planets of the ape.
You don't really need to go all the way back to the Charlton Heston in order to watch this new trilogy. It's its own separate storytelling for sure. But yeah, I love Dawn of the Planet of the Apes.
Nice one.
I love the character of Koba because I love villains. I love villains that are justifiably want to burn the world down. I love those types of villains. So I love Koba. I love that they had the bravery to basically have huge chunks of this movie with no dialogue because the apes are primarily communicating through sign language. Right. And I absolutely love that. I love the orangutan character. I love that movie. So that I'm going to say that one's my favorite of the past 10 years.
There's some recommendations for everyone. All right. Well, that's I got to get on out of here, man.
You sure do.
This has been pretty good. We did do the 2-hour club today, didn't we?
Oh, and then and some 2-hour plus club. That's what the plus is for. And you know what? I went and scrolled up before I said the final 2 names that are on our list that will be first up next week. We're back to pretty much normal here. And now I scrolled way too far down because I still have the notes from the episode that Tom and I recorded just yesterday. So hold on.
So yeah, Blake and Daz are coming up next time.
Okay, there you go. You found it before I did. Blake and Taz. Sorry about all that. That's ridiculous. But yeah, Blake and Daz, you're first up next week. We're back on track here.
Yeah. Do you feel normal now? I know you felt really weird being behind.
Yeah.
It really bothered Rob more than it bothered any listener.
Absolutely. So want to make sure we thank our listeners of the week one more time here. That's our 131 patrons over at patreon.com/AVRant podcast. Karl and Martin are two of our patrons. So thank you very much for the financial support there. Vincent went and sent me an Amazon gift card. So thank you very much, Vincent. Very nice of you. And then, we've got our notes of gratitude and encouragement that came in from BJ, Bertrand, Yuri, Bob, Ariel, Ariel? Karl, Martin, and Blake.
Ariel.
It just, I don't know why that clicked into my brain for some reason. I'm getting loopy, but really do appreciate those notes of gratitude and encouragement. We are back. We're here. We only missed 1 week. It wasn't ridiculous in terms of our hiatus.
It's okay. It's going to be okay, Rob.
It's going to be all right.
Everything's fine now. Relax.
And that's wonderful. We thank everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions. And if you want to have your question answered on this podcast, please email it to us. That is by far the best way to be in touch with us. question@avrant.com. That's our email address. Please send your questions to question@avrant.com. So, gonna say a huge thank you to Lee. Lee, how can folks get in touch with you if they would like
First of all, you're very welcome. You know I'll jump on here whenever I can. It's fun for me. I love it. And if people want to get in touch with me, I guess the easiest way is Twitter. You can find me at Lee Overstreet, because I'm Lee Overstreet.
It's there in his lower third on the Chiron down there, folks, if you're looking on YouTube. Got to figure out how to type it in. You don't even have to.
I'm pointing down. I'm pointing down for So for people that aren't watching, I'm pointing down at my lower third. At Lee Overtweet is the best. Even though I have my little at Tesla Lusa account, but that's just if you want to talk about EVs and electric cars and stuff like that. Obviously, I'll enjoy that as well.
Wonderful. Well, I hope everybody enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed your double dose of AVRant in, I don't know when this is going to release. So hopefully people will figure out some time to listen to all this. And I will say on behalf of Tom Andry, this has been AVRant. I am Rob H.
And I'm Lee Overstreet. Now, stay home, maybe go out safely and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.